Chapter 121. Very tired. What? Not only Millie Tosser, but everyone present was shocked. Some people shouted, and some people took a breath of cold air. They all felt that the wizard in front of them was not only crazy, but also mad. Before Millie Tosser could speak, Daniel Hawkins laughed and said, "What's the matter? You can't afford it. If you can't afford it, forget it." Then he was about to leave. Go, 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 go quickly. Millie Tosser said. Night Tosser said, "I will give you the hardware, so I will give you so much money a month. What can you provide me?" "I can help you kill Daniel Hawkins." Daniel Hawkins glanced at Millie Tosser, and saw her face twitched and froze in place. Daniel Hawkins was very curious about what her attitude would be when her brother and father were enemies. However, no matter how exaggerated the idol chasing was, it would not be to unite with her brother to kill her father. Night Toss was also paying attention to his daughter's emotions. He patted his daughter on the back and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I will give him a chance. If Daniel Hawkins is willing to surrender to me, I will never kill him. If you like, I will recruit him as my son-in-law, ha ha ha." Millie Toss blushed and said, "What if he doesn't surrender? Didn't you promise me that you would find a way to convince him? This is your main task." Night Toss said. "What if I still can't convince him?" Millie Toss asked. "Then there is no way." Night Toss smiled. Fortunately, Millie Toss would not throw a tantrum. She also knew that although her father loved her very much, she could not be ambiguous when facing such a big thing as territorial power. Millie Tosser said, "He has no chance of winning. What else can he do if he doesn't surrender? Maybe the war won't even start." Night Tosser smiled and said, "Then what are you worried about?" "Worry? What am I worried about? I'm not worried." Millie Tosser blushed and said, "Hey, Danny, when we go to the battlefield, you have to listen to my orders. If I tell you to stop, you'd better stop. If you really kill Daniel Hawkins, I'll only blame you. But you can't kill him. He's a genius, a national champion." Daniel Hawkins smiled, neither agreed nor refused, just said, "We'll see when the time comes." Daniel Hawkins didn't expect that he would become a traitor one day. However, he doesn't need to explain his traitor to his boss. He is his own boss. Therefore, as long as he doesn't take off the mask and supplements his story background, there is almost no risk of leakage. Thinking that he will live in this castle in the future, he will take it as an early adaptation. Since he was the best among all wizards, he was treated the best. He received the best salary, had the best room and food, and even had his own servants, but he suspected that these servants were just to monitor him. These good treatments he had naturally made other wizard colleagues jealous, but other wizards could do nothing about it. There were one or two fearless people who came to provoke him, and he taught them a lesson with a few ice cones. Therefore, he lived a comfortable life here. The only thing that made him unhappy was that he was not allowed to leave the castle without permission. In addition, Millie Toss always came to bother him and always wanted to challenge him. He upgraded Frozen Heart to level 10 in the system. He didn't expect that he could get skills for free here. Fortunately, he had enough money with him. He and Millie Tosser had been fighting for a long time, and they talked more often. He was still so annoying in her heart. Every time he defeated Millie Tosser, he would always make fun of Daniel Hawkins. It was really fun to see Millie Tosser angry and annoyed. He found that Millie Tosser was really obsessed with Daniel Hawkins, that is, himself. Once he passed by a room and found Millie Tosser painting in it. All of them were Daniel Hawkins in her imagination. There was even a picture of them getting married. To be honest, after seeing this scene, he was a little scared of such fanatical fans. He couldn't help but go in and joked, "Why are you so obsessed with this Daniel Hawkins? National champion, who wouldn't be obsessed? If not obsessed with her, would I be obsessed with you?" Millie Tosser ignored him and just continued to paint. In addition to studying magic, this was her daily entertainment. I have to say that Millie Tossie is quite cool in expressing her feelings openly. If it were any other girl, she would probably be shy. Daniel Hawkins walked to the painting of them getting married and couldn't help but say, "Are you so sure he will like you?" Millie Tossie threw the paintbrush into the bucket and shouted, "Am I not beautiful? Beautiful." Daniel Hawkins didn't even have to think about this easy question. "That's it," Millie Tossie said, "I have investigated. He is a commoner. Although he is a baron now, we have more wealth than him. The ancient god gave him this land just to let me meet him. Ah, thank the ancient god. Damn, what kind of logic is this? Just when Daniel Hawkins was still confused, Millie Tossey continued, but why has Daniel Hawkins been silent all this time? Daniel Hawkins pretended to appreciate the painting and said leisurely, maybe he doesn't dare to come. As you said, he has nothing except a fiefdom scroll. No matter how talented he is, it is difficult for him to fight against thousands of troops. If I were him, I would work in the Wizard Association, or be a teacher in the Wizard Academy and spend my whole life. Millie Toss nodded. She rarely agreed with him, what you said makes sense. If so, it would be the best. I asked my father to bring him here to get married immediately. However, I have been to the Wizard Association and the Wizard Academy. I just didn't see him. You went to the slums too? Daniel Hawkins asked. What a joke, how could I go to that kind of place? Millie Toss said, and it doesn't make sense. He can't stay in the slums all the time. Daniel Hawkins felt speechless. He had seen a royal sister, but he had never seen such a domineering royal sister. Well, there is another reason to hide his identity. If the identity is exposed, then you have to get married. You are still a little older than him, right? Daniel Hawkins asked, you are 4 years older than him. What a joke, even though I am in the 5th grade, I am also a genius, I skipped a grade, I am only 3 years older than him. Besides, in front of love, age is nothing. Am I not beautiful? Millie Tossey broke her pen directly this time. Yeah, beautiful. Daniel Hawkins thought to himself, beautiful and crazy, forget it, tiring. Chapter 122. I want to resign. Daniel Hawkins has been here for a month without realizing it. He not only learned a skill for free, but also got a salary for free. The main reason is that he really has nothing to do here except spying on military intelligence. He doesn't need to train every day like a soldier, let alone stay in a specific barracks and sleep with other soldiers. As long as he is a wizard, he can have a separate room, not to mention Daniel Hawkins, the most powerful wizard. And there are arrangements for women. Night Toss regularly asks wizards to deliver some maniang here regularly, but this is also a considerable expense, so only some specific warriors and wizards can enjoy it. I have to say that Night Toss is really thoughtful. To Millie Toss's surprise, Daniel Hawkins has never enjoyed it once, and she has to wonder if there is something wrong with his ability in that aspect, or if he doesn't like women. Therefore, every time maniang comes, Millie Toss always teases him, and Daniel Hawkins just rolls his eyes at him and doesn't bother to pay attention to him. This makes her even more excited, and later, the teasing turns into ridicule. Finally, one time, Daniel Hawkins couldn't stand it anymore, and walked towards her directly, saying with a smirk, maniang is not as fun as you. Millie Toss was so scared that she left in a flash. At least Daniel Hawkins had a few days of peace. Although Night Toss was usually secretive, Daniel Hawkins still got some information. Although the 2 earls of Dawntown funded Night Toss to deal with him, at least he couldn't get his own territory smoothly. But from Millie's mouth, I learned that Night Toss didn't take Daniel Hawkins seriously at all. The reason is still very simple. He didn't think Daniel Hawkins had the conditions to raise an army to fight him. Therefore, he used the earl's money to recruit soldiers and horses, not to deal with the Hawkins family, but to deal with the southern area occupied by the Jackals. He wanted to unify the entire Sonk town. This is a great thing for Daniel Hawkins. The more Night Toss underestimated him, the more time he had to prepare, and the less likely he would be exposed. Millie Tosser never cared about any gnolls. She only cared about Daniel Hawkins. Whenever she saw her father, Night Tosser, coming back, she would go up and ask, "What's up? Have you found Daniel Hawkins?" Night Tosser would always comfort her, "Not yet, but soon, don't worry." In fact, he didn't go looking for him at all, because Daniel Hawkins once heard him say to Millie, "My people seem to have seen him at the branch of the Wizard Association in Seraphia. I will send someone to contact him then." Daniel Hawkins just laughed and shook his head helplessly. When Millie Tosser saw this, she would get angry and say, "What are you laughing at? What's so funny?" "Ah, no, I'm just happy that you found Daniel Hawkins," Daniel Hawkins said. "That's about right. When Daniel Hawkins comes, I'll let him teach you a lesson, so that you can understand what it means to be a genuine wizard from a regular wizard academy." Millie Toss said this and started to be crazy again, as if Daniel Hawkins was already her husband. Especially when she heard that Daniel Hawkins worked in the Wizard Association, she was even happier, which meant that he would not conflict with her father. Every time Daniel Hawkins saw such a scene, he was glad that he came here to be a traitor. When Daniel Hawkins had a rough idea of the general combat power and personnel of Night Toss, he felt that there was no value in staying here, so he wanted to leave. He thought about resigning directly, but he was afraid that once he resigned, the other party would definitely not let him go. After all, he killed 3 wizards. He had been here for a month and had been recruiting for so long. Not to mention wizards, it was difficult to recruit warriors with a little level. Most of the recruits were soldiers, and there was not a single wizard. He could already imagine that if he said he wanted to leave, Night Toss would definitely kill him on the spot, and first concentrate all his forces to knock him down directly, which would be too troublesome. So he planned to teleport away directly, but after all, he took the other party's hardware, ate well, lived comfortably, and could interact with the royal sister. Most importantly, he spied on a lot of intelligence. If he just left like this, he would still feel a little guilty. He thought about it, and in order to solve this little bit of guilt, he decided to write a resignation letter. As a man of action, he picked up a pen and paper and started writing immediately. The general content was, "Thank you for your trust and hospitality, but please forgive me for my unruly and free love in this life." After writing, he took a cup to press the paper, and then when he was about to perform the teleportation spell, he saw Millie Toss directly opened his door, which scared him. "Hey, my dad wants to see you. He's going to have a meeting." Millie Tosser said, "What did you want to do just now?" "Ah, you wanted to leave." "No, I didn't," Daniel Hawkins stretched, "I just stretched my muscles." "You have to know that if you leave, you will want to come back later," Millie Tosser said. "I know, I don't have the income of a month's 5 gold coins, and it's useless to regret it later." Daniel Hawkins certainly knew that Night Tosser's generosity was one of the means to keep people. It's just that Daniel Hawkins is different from others. Others really want to find a job, but he is a rich man who is not short of money. "I'm not that stupid. My income is higher than that of the Wizarding Academy. I can still live in a castle, have people to take care of me, and can even tease the eldest lady." Daniel Hawkins laughed. Millie Tosay rolled her eyes at him. "Fuck you, go to the hall quickly. It's an emergency. Hurry up." At the urging of Millie Tosay, Daniel Hawkins left the room, ran and flashed all the way, and came to the hall, where he saw all the corps members were there. The last time he faced this situation was when he killed 3 wizards on the spot during the interview. It seemed that something was really important. As Millie Tosay followed closely behind, Night Tosay said solemnly, "I found that at the junction of the west and south areas of our Sonk town, there were some extra houses for no reason, and I was very surprised. Sure, there are people living and moving inside. Come and discuss what's going on." After saying that, Night Tosay threw the marked map into the center of the hall. "That's the location. Take a look." The soldier closest to him picked up the map and looked at it for a long time. Seeing that he was silent, the other soldiers and wizards grabbed it impatiently and passed it around to each other. Chapter 123. I want to go too. Daniel Hawkins had a very bad premonition, especially after he looked at the map. Isn't the mark on the map the temporary military camp planned by his father Rob? While everyone was talking, he was trying to think of countermeasures. At least one thing he was sure of was that he could not resign now. How could anyone live in that place? It's impossible. It's such a barren mountain. That's right. It must be a mistake. Is it the abandoned house from before? No, that's where I came from. When I came, I was very sure that there was an empty land with no houses. What kind of person would build a house there? I think the possibility of human beings is unlikely. I am most afraid of. At this point, this person did not dare to say anything, and everyone looked at Night Tosay. Night Tosay pointed at him and said, "Go on and say what you just wanted to say." "I think it should be a jackal," the man said. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire audience fell silent, all looking at Night Tosay, waiting for his instructions. If they are really jackals, it means that the jackals are expanding their territory, which means that the number of jackals has increased again. Night Tosay thought of this and couldn't help but cursed secretly, "Damn, those jackals are really capable of living. If they are no longer controlled or exterminated, sooner or later the entire Sonk town will be occupied." At this time, he said to Daniel Hawkins, "Danny, you have been very quiet, what do you think? Daniel Hawkins yawned loudly and said, what's the use of talking here for so long? Without investigation, you have no right to speak. Just send someone to check it out. Nitose praised, well said. After saying that, he originally thought of arranging for a warrior to go, but then he thought that if it was really a jackal, one warrior might not be able to handle it, so he arranged for 3 more, a warrior and a wizard, a total of 5 people. Nitose told them to just go and have a look this time just to spy on the military situation. If there is any danger, they should withdraw as soon as possible. They all said yes. Daniel Hawkins stood up at this time and said, if I go, I can do it alone. The 5 people looked at Daniel Hawkins with unhappy expressions, and agreed that Daniel Hawkins wanted to steal the credit. Nitose said, are you serious? Am I joking? Daniel Hawkins said. In order not to make Nitose suspicious, he continued, after all, I gave you 5 gold coins a month, which is also the highest salary in the game. Sir Knight, let's do something for you first. Nitose nodded and said, you really don't want anyone else to go with you? Daniel Hawkins said, there is no need to waste manpower and material resources, and 1 more person will only be a burden on me. Well, Nitose felt that he had really seen the right person. 5 gold coins a month were spent, and the money was really well spent, then you should go and come back quickly. Daniel Hawkins was secretly happy, waiting to see the situation clearly before deciding whether to come back. Just when he was about to teleport, Nitose interrupted again, I'm going too, I'll go with you. Daniel Hawkins was stunned, and Nitose also felt surprised. Millie, what are you going to do? Nitose asked, everyone said there is no problem if you go alone. Yes, miss, you'd better stop making trouble. If you encounter a jackal, it's not a joke. Daniel Hawkins complained, I don't want to get in the way to protect you. I don't need your protection, Nitose said, either you don't go anyway, if you go I will go. Besides, if I give you so much money a month, even if you really want to protect me, shouldn't you? After saying that, she looked at her father and said, Father, it's okay. I'm a wizard. I have a lot of life-saving skills. Besides, aren't there Danny, the 2 strongest wizards on the scene? And it's too big here. I'm bored and I want to have some fun. After Nitose persuaded her father, Nitose reluctantly agreed to Millie, and told Daniel Hawkins that he must bring his daughter back safely. Daniel Hawkins really didn't want to take Millie with him, which would make it even more difficult for him to inform his father Robert. Moreover, it has been such a long time. Is there any shortage of money on my father's side? Is there any problem? The top priority now is to connect with my father. It's better now. There is a eldest lady by my side. How to connect is a headache. As expected by Daniel Hawkins, the wooden house in the wasteland in front of him was built by his father, Rob, and was already occupied by many people. Fortunately it's not a jackal. Nitose said. Yet. When Daniel Hawkins saw his father Rob walking out, he tried his best to calm down, pretending to be calm, and smiled at Millie, let's go, it seems like it's just an ordinary pub. Opening a tavern in this place. Nitose said, it's strange. Let's go and see if it's a real tavern. After seeing these 2 wizards, Rob Hawkins couldn't help but feel a little nervous, but he quickly calmed down, walked up to them and said with a smile, welcome, 2 travelers. Under the leadership of Rob Hawkins, they entered the back room. The furnishings inside were indeed no different from those in a pub. Look, I'll just say it's a tavern, said Daniel Hawkins. Nitose ignored him and just asked Rob Hawkins, why did you open a tavern in this place? Daniel Hawkins looked at his father, curious what he would say. Rob Hawkins looked embarrassed and said, to tell you the truth, I made some money through the lucky shop in the national wizarding competition. But the money was not enough to start a business in the urban area. So I opened the tavern here in order to gain wealth through danger. So, you made money in the lucky shop? So you won by buying Daniel Hawkins? Nitose suddenly became interested. Yes, after all, the odds are so high, and as I just said, wealth comes from insurance. I am one of the few who won by buying Daniel Hawkins. Rob Hawkins said. It seems that you are quite discerning. Nitose was immediately attracted to the tavern owner in front of her, but she still had some suspicions. This place is deserted, and there are also jackals. No matter how you look at it, you can't see it. Like a wise choice. Rob Hawkins said, I heard that some people will go to Sunk Forest to hunt for treasures, so my store is prepared for these treasure hunters. As for the jackals, I will ask some warriors to protect this place. There is no other way, except that this land is neither the territory of the Tozanites nor the tribe of the jackals. I don't have to pay taxes to anyone, and there are no censorships. It's very free. Chapter 124. Look at him. Daniel Hawkins listened to his father's words and couldn't help but give him a thumbs up in his heart. It seems that his father is not only good at fighting, but also very active. His words can also explain why he asked some soldiers to be here. Seeing that Millie Tosser began to believe, Rob Hawkins continued, moreover, these soldiers of mine not only help me guard here, but also help me transport goods. More importantly, they are all unemployed vagrants. I only need to take care of their food and accommodation, and then spend very little money to hire them. After all this, the cost is actually lower than opening a town hall in downtown. Rob's words implied that their own soldiers were not very useful except for helping to protect their own small piece of land, so they don't have to worry. Daniel Hawkins glanced at Millie Tosser's reaction from time to time. Seeing her expression of listening carefully, there should be no problem. However, Millie Tosser said, I'm sorry, I still don't quite understand. If a group of bandits or jackals come to your place, it will be enough to make your investment go down the drain. Unless... Daniel and Rob couldn't help swallowing their saliva, and Millie continued, unless you are not ordinary warriors, including you, the boss. Daniel and Rob couldn't help but get nervous when they heard her say that. You must have enough confidence to deal with bandits and jackals, which means you are all talented. You shouldn't open a store here, you should join our Tosser family. Millie Tosser said. Ah. Rob Hawkins didn't know what to say for a while. Afterwards, Millie introduced their Tosser family crazily, such as recruiting soldiers and horses, and super good treatment. She even pointed to Daniel next to her and said, you can look at him, he can make 5 gold coins a month. At this time, a soldier came over and asked curiously, Miss, is what you said true? Daniel and Rob couldn't help but twitch their faces after hearing this. This won't do, Daniel thought. If this goes on, the soldiers he had finally recruited will be taken away by Millie. Even if they are not taken away, it will easily shake the morale of the army. Robert hurriedly said, Miss, you can't be like this. If you want to eat and drink here, you can't poach my people. Let's put it this way. You are the first batch of guests. I will treat you today. But I hope you don't say anything else. Otherwise. What will happen otherwise? Millie Tosser said. Robert Hawkins changed his face and said, I can only drive you away, and don't blame me for being rude. Millie Tosser couldn't stand threats the most in her life. She was thinking about what to say, but with a pop, she turned her head and saw that it was Daniel Hawkins who was angrily slamming the table. Daniel Hawkins said angrily, what are you kidding? You mean we are all unreasonable people? You don't need to treat us. If you have any wine or food, just bring them out. We are guests and we will pay. After that, he took out the coins and slapped them on the table and shouted, are you still driving us away? Rob Hawkins smiled and took the money and said quickly, wait a moment, 2 guests. He wanted to leave quickly. If he continued to talk, he would be speechless. He didn't expect that Miss Tossie would come. Daniel Hawkins did the same. He took this opportunity to send his father away. After a while, someone came with wine and food, but this time it was not Rob, but someone else. Rob would definitely not come again. He just stayed at the bar to pack up and didn't want to see them at all. Millie Toss watched Daniel Hawkins pick up a piece of ham and put it in his mouth, and she said, hey, you really eat it? Eat it, why not? Daniel Hawkins said, anyway, you've paid, and you want to know if this is a proper pub, so try their food and beer. What do you think? Millie Toss asked in a low voice. I don't think there's anything wrong with this pub. Daniel Hawkins tried to excuse the pub. I always feel something is weird. Millie Toss said, who would open a pub in such a place? Didn't the boss tell you the reason? Daniel Hawkins asked. That being said, it's still strange. Just look at the pub in our Songke town. In addition, there is famine everywhere now. If it weren't for our support, they wouldn't be able to open it at all. So, there is only one reason, this pub also has family support behind it. Millie Toss said, and couldn't help but drink beer. Daniel Hawkins was shocked, but his face remained calm. He said, assuming your analysis is correct, what family do you think is behind this tavern? Millie Toss shook her head and said, I'll talk to my father when I get back. Daniel Hawkins did not refute Millie Toss's words. He felt that further rebuttal would only make him more suspicious. He also knew that as his father recruited more and more people, he would be exposed sooner or later. What he needed most now was to contact his father, so he did not plan to stay in the castle next. Millie Toss still looked around, looking at the tavern and everyone in it. She was sure that there was no waiter, and all the waiters were soldiers. Daniel Hawkins was thinking while eating, whether to get her drunk and then send her back and then go by himself, or teleport away directly later. However, it didn't seem good for a man to get a woman drunk, so he decided to make an appointment with her to teleport back to the castle when he went back later, but he himself would teleport to the slums of downtown. Okay, that's it. When the two of them had enough to eat and drink, Daniel Hawkins began to plan to implement his plan, so he said, let's go back. Millie Toss nodded. Just as Daniel Hawkins was about to teleport, Millie Toss suddenly grabbed his hand and said, you're drunk, I'll teleport you. No, Daniel Hawkins said the next word use, he was already in the castle hall. He was stunned, looking at Millie Toss. Was he exposed? It was impossible. Millie Toss said to a servant, please take the room next to Danny. I will live there from now on. Then Millie Toss kept asking Daniel Hawkins to follow her and be inseparable. Daniel Hawkins was sure that he was not exposed, so he felt very puzzled. It was not until he returned to his room that he found that the resignation letter he wrote in the morning was missing. He immediately understood what was going on. He sneered. If he really wanted to leave, who could stop him? In just a moment, he teleported away. Millie Toss noticed the surge of magic in the next room and rushed over immediately, but it was too late. Millie stamped her feet in anger, thinking, if I had known, I would have shared a room with him so that I could keep an eye on him. Chapter 125. Magic Identification Stone. The lobby of Toss Castle. It must be said that when the wizards present heard that Daniel Hawkins had resigned, they were all very happy. Although they might not be able to take up the position and benefits vacated by Daniel Hawkins, it was really uncomfortable to see a young talent who was far superior to them and made people envious and jealous wandering around them. As soon as Daniel Hawkins left, their stage was back. Night Toss was very angry when he saw Daniel Hawkins' resignation letter. He threw the letter on the ground and ordered a fire wizard to burn it. Just as the wizard was about to burn it, Millie Toss hurriedly said, wait a minute. She stepped forward and snatched the resignation letter, turned around and said to her father, let's keep it first. When I see him later, I will have evidence when I question him. Night Toss was stunned. What evidence did he need when the person left? However, he sometimes couldn't figure out what his daughter did, so he just let her do it. After all, it was just a piece of torn paper. But he was still very angry. Damn it, now is the time to use people. Danny is so ignorant of the world. I treat him well. A wizard quickly added, I think Danny is just a scumbag. That's right, the knight is so kind, but he still wants to leave. He must not have real ability. That's right, he is afraid of being exposed. Listening to them insulting Danny, Millie Toss couldn't stand it anymore. She retorted, Danny killed 3 of our wizards at once, and I am not his opponent. This is obvious to all. Miss, it is very likely that Danny just took some kind of enhancement potion temporarily. This is like him. The purpose of a wild wizard is to surprise us first, get a job and live a lazy life, and then take the opportunity to slip away after getting a high salary. That's right, Danny came here for the hardware from the beginning. They talked more and more excitedly, and Millie Toss became more and more speechless and angry. She wanted to continue to refute them, but her father stopped her. It's not worth it to cause internal disputes for a wild wizard. Night Toss stood up and said to everyone sternly, next time I see him, I will kill him. Everyone, okay. Millie. After being speechless, she told her father about the investigation she and Danny had done in the tavern yesterday. She told her father her analysis in detail, and Night Toss nodded while listening. According to his daughter, the tavern was indeed suspicious. After a discussion, they finally concluded that the tavern must be a group of desperate robbers disguised as a tavern. This statement is more reasonable. In any case, this group of robbers should be eliminated as soon as possible. Only Millie Tosser asked, Could it be that Daniel Hawkins is recruiting soldiers and using that place as a temporary base? Night Tosser heard this and said, if it's true, it would be even better. We have to get rid of them anyway, so let's get rid of them at the same time. He thought it was less likely that it was Daniel Hawkins. After all, recruiting soldiers costs money, and Daniel Hawkins is a young boy, where would the money come from? And he hadn't heard of which family Daniel Hawkins had received support from. In order to deal with them all at once, Night Tosser arranged 3 warriors and 2 mages this time, and the 3 warriors had nearly 30 soldiers under their command. In his eyes, it was more than enough to deal with this group of bandits. With the increasing number of recruits, coupled with the temporary houses built in the wasteland, the transportation of food and water, etc., funds have begun to be scarce. He couldn't help but worry, because he hadn't seen his son for almost a month, but he still carried out the recruitment step by step. While thinking about contacting his son, he had to keep his mind steady. Only when his mind was stable could he keep this group of warriors stable. Another thing he was worried about was that after receiving the 2 wizards from the Tosser family last time, he had a bad feeling, so he arranged 2 soldiers to go outside to keep watch in advance. Now, the thing he was worried about came today. He only heard the soldiers outside shouting that a group of people were coming to them, and they were armed. Rob Hawkins heard it and gave orders without saying a word. Everyone picked up their weapons and lined up outside. As the opposite approached, the 3 soldiers on the horse drew their swords and pointed forward. 30 soldiers shouted and rushed towards Rob Hawkins. In terms of soldiers, although the number of people on Rob Hawkins' side reached nearly 30, there were only 2 of them who could be considered serious fighters, including Rob himself. The rest could only be considered relatively capable soldiers. Rob Hawkins had never expected that the population of the entire kingdom had increased, but recruitment had become more difficult, especially to recruit real talents. More importantly, the price was actually much higher. This was a huge difference from when he was a lord. He couldn't help but worry that even if he saw his son, he wouldn't have enough funds to operate. But now the most urgent thing is not to think about this, since they have come here to kill, just do it. The enemy's 30 soldiers could have been evenly matched, and in terms of bloodiness, Hawkins' side was more bloody, but the opponent's weapons and armor were much better than Hawkins' side. Hawkins' side couldn't help but fall into a hard fight. As the opposing fighters joined the fight, so did Rob Hawkins and another fighter. The 2 warriors on Hawkins' side were really brave enough. As soon as they started fighting, Rob Hawkins directly used his crusher to cut off the opponent's head, and Rob's companion also cut off the head within 3 rounds. After losing one of the opponent's arms, now the opponent only has 1 warrior left. Take the opponent's magic identification stone. Rob Hawkins shouted as he took the headless warrior away. When the soldiers heard this, they glanced at the 2 evil smiling wizards on the other side, were shocked, and hurriedly grabbed it. The 2 wizards found it very funny watching the enemy soldiers trying to snatch the magic identification stones, and some even searched them from the corpses. It was impossible for them to search. The 2 wizards began to cast spells, and a blizzard began to fall in the sky. The soldiers who did not have the magic identification stone screamed again and again, and they could not bear it for a few times. The soldiers of the Hawkins family came one after another. Fell, and only the soldiers who succeeded in snatching were spared. However, even so, there is no chance of winning this battle. According to Rob's understanding, the magic identification stone can not only avoid the magic damage of his own wizard, but even the best identification stone only lasts for 1 hour at most. Just when Rob Hawkins felt desperate, he heard a voice shouting, "Get everyone out!" When Rob Hawkins heard this, his hope was rekindled. He squinted and saw that it was his son, Daniel Hawkins. "Retreat, everyone, retreat!" Rob Hawkins roared. When the soldiers heard this, they retreated one after another. Chapter 126. You can do it, and so can I. After seeing the soldiers retreating out of the scope of the blizzard, Daniel Hawkins shouted to his father, "You too, retreat." But Rob Hawkins was reluctant, thinking about charging the last warrior with the breaker. "No, but this is an order, retreat." After Daniel Hawkins shouted, he flashed to the outside of the blizzard with his shield, and smiled at the 2 wizards. "Is it a blizzard? Sorry, so will I." There happened to be 4 soldiers left on the battlefield who had not grabbed the identification stone. Just when they were about to lose their hold, Rob Hawkins gave a gesture to his fellow soldiers, who nodded. I saw them throwing down the weapons in their hands, grabbing the collar of a soldier with one hand, and just like this, One person took 2 soldiers, shouted, and dragged them out of the blizzard. The enemy soldiers saw them fleeing and chased after them. Daniel Hawkins flashed over and released a huge ice ring that froze all the enemies in place. Then he looked at the 2 men behind them. The wizard smiled and said, "Is it a snowstorm? I'm sorry, I can do it too." Daniel Hawkins cast a spell, and a more powerful blizzard blew up in an instant. The enemy soldiers were heard screaming in pain in the blizzard. In less than 5 seconds, they all fell to the ground. Facing Daniel Hawkins, whose magic was so powerful, the 2 wizards were shocked. One of them wanted to teleport away, but was defeated by Daniel's instant ice pick. Seeing this, the other man chose not to teleport, but turned his horse and rode away. He was also killed by an ice pick. There were dozens of enemy soldiers, but no one survived. "Where have you been?" Rob Hawkins lamented, "We lost 15 soldiers in this battle." Daniel Hawkins heard a hint of complaint from his father's words, but he was not angry. Although soldiers were destined to go through life and death and live a life of licking blood from the edge of a knife, after all, there were still more than a dozen living lives. He took out a bag of money and threw it on the table and said, "I'm going to get some money." In fact, he went to the bank to withdraw money. If he had known that the Tosai Knights would arrive so soon, he would have withdrawn it a day or 2 later. If he had arrived earlier, the dozen soldiers could have been saved. "This money is not enough," Rob Hawkins said. "This time we barely managed to survive, but next time, even if I can recruit enough people, look at the weapons over there. And armor, this time we can loot it from the opponent's corpse, but the quantity is still far from enough, especially the magic identification stone, which is really expensive." Daniel Hawkins nodded, picked up the magic identification stone given by his father, looked at it, and said, "This is the first time I have seen such a thing." After his father's simple science popularization, he roughly understood that after the wizard injected his own magic and let his soldiers carry it, he would be protected from the spells of his own wizard. As for the duration, it depends on the quality of the identification stone. The best ones can last for an hour and cannot be reused. Only magic weapon shops in big cities like Seraphia sell them, and they use rare ores. No wonder they are so expensive. Naitose asked everyone to wear magic recognition stones this time. It seemed that he wanted to get rid of them once and for all. "Father, you don't have to worry about these things. I will continue to think of ways to deal with money. I will continue to give you money tomorrow. If I am not here tomorrow and cannot come back in time, although the possibility is very small, if the Tosai Knight attacks again, don't fight anymore, just withdraw, these houses will be gone if they are gone." Rob Hawkins nodded. Now they have no other choice. This place is a wilderness, without city walls, and there is nothing except these wooden houses. The materials of these wooden houses are still from the Songke forest. It was cut down here. If nothing else, Rob Hawkins poured himself a glass of dark beer and said, "If the jackals come to attack us now, we will be in trouble. Lord, look at them again. They are dead and wounded. We didn't even get treatment for his injuries. Fortunately, I prepared the life potion in advance, otherwise, sigh." Daniel Hawkins nodded and said, "I know, we want a real territory, a real base. Isn't that what we are working hard to do now?" Rob Hawkins looked at his determined son, who was just drinking beer and not talking. He felt that there seemed to be little hope. Looking at his somewhat depressed father, Daniel Hawkins put his hand on his shoulder and said, "Are we just giving up our own territory without even fighting for it? As for the dead soldiers, you go arrange for people to investigate and record their names to see if they have any family members. I will provide compensation to those who have family members. If there are no family members, I will give them identities." When Rob Hawkins and everyone heard this, their eyes lit up and they all looked at Daniel Hawkins. One of them even limped forward and asked, "Lord, you said that we ordinary soldiers died in the battle. There is also compensation, is this true?" Then he pointed at Rob Hawkins and said, "He didn't say that when he recruited him. And no lord has done this since ancient times. For ordinary soldiers who died in battle, they just buried them. It's more dignified. Just put a bunch of flowers on it." Rob Hawkins also found it incredible. He couldn't help but pull his son, and then whispered in his son's ear, "This is too expensive." Daniel Hawkins ignored his father, just looked at the soldiers in the house, and said loudly, "What I said above is true. You follow me. As long as you are loyal to me and don't betray me, your parents are my parents, your family is my family, and I will not treat you unfairly." The soldiers listened to the words of the Baron and looked at each other with doubt in their eyes. After all, they have seen many lords who talk big and pretend to be generous. Daniel Hawkins knew what they were thinking, so he stood on the table and said loudly, "Rob Hawkins told me that as long as I can afford the money, I can recruit capable warriors." Hearing this, everyone lowered their heads in shame again, because they all knew how much they were worth, and the Baron did give a lot of money. They all felt that they were not worthy of that salary. Especially Rob Hawkins, he was even more ashamed, because these people were recruited by him. Daniel Hawkins continued, "I know your situation. No matter how well I treat you, can it be better than those viscounts, earls, or even knights with territories? Once there are better conditions somewhere else and you can go there, you will abandon me, right? It is precisely because your level is not good enough and other places don't want you, so you have no choice but to follow me, a baron without territory, right?" They lowered their heads and said nothing. Chapter 127. The Glory of the Lord. "However, I don't care about your attitude and thoughts," Daniel Hawkins said. "If you have a better place to go in the future, I don't mind if you leave, and I don't need you to worship me. The glory of the Lord is your glory, whatever the Lord's pride is your pride, and you should fight for the Lord. I don't need you to fight for me. You came to me today just for a job to support yourself, your family, the glory of the Lord, etc. Go away. It is the most normal for you to have this idea. Yes, you don't have to bow your head, you don't have to be ashamed." Rob Hawkins felt that what his son said was too incredible. He couldn't understand, so he said, "Baron, are you kidding me? If I don't fight for your honor, this isn't the right thing to do." "You have to fight for yourselves," Daniel Hawkins said loudly. "To be honest, you don't want to go hungry, you want your family to be fed and clothed. I can't give you other things, but if you help me seize the territory, if you come back and follow me, I can guarantee that I will never treat you badly. From now on, those who wander will no longer wander, those who are hungry will be fed, and your families will live a good life. You don't need to worship me like other lords, you just need to work for me, please. Today you have sacrificed a lot in this battle, and I can't do anything else. If you want to leave, I understand, and I will give you a compensation." After Daniel Hawkins finished speaking, he got down from the table. Just as he ordered Rob Hawkins to record the name of the deceased, count the money to be distributed, put it on the table, and wait for them to resign. After a long time, no one came to take the money. Only a soldier stood up and shouted, "I am willing to follow the Baron." Then the other one stood up and said, "I do too. I would like that too. I would also like to." Everyone's fighting spirit began to rise again. This time, Daniel Hawkins took more money with him than usual. He didn't want to waste time in the wizard bank. Sure enough, once there was a war, money had to be spent everywhere. He and his father divided the army. He was responsible for recruiting wizards and purchasing magic identification stones, while his father continued to recruit warriors and soldiers, and by the way, he also purchased relatively sophisticated weapons and armor. Especially for life potions, you can no longer use low-level ones, you have to use high-level ones. This money cannot be saved. Soldiers who are disabled must recover quickly. That's a lot of money again, and well, there are costs everywhere. Although he was not short of money for the time being, he couldn't bear it if he continued to spend it like this. The Southwest Wasteland has officially become his temporary base. Every time Daniel Hawkins wants to leave, he will worry about the attack of the Tozay Knights. However, fortunately, the Tozay Knights have not come again. He and his father are now seizing the time to recruit troops. Fortunately, the Emperor has paid off. His father, Rob, has recruited many good warriors and soldiers. Daniel Hawkins will give some speeches from time to time. There is no empty talk, but some real facts on their welfare concerns. This creates a very contradictory scene. The more Daniel Hawkins emphasizes not to worship him, the more they worship him. Every time he finished his speech, there was thunderous applause, and the soldiers were excited. As for wizards, Daniel Hawkins couldn't recruit anyone yet, and the wizards who applied for the job either asked for a very high salary at the outset, or were reluctant to go to the southwest wasteland of Songkei Town when they heard that they were going there. In desperation, Daniel Hawkins could only say that the position of wizard could only be filled by him. However, he is still very confident about the wizard in Tosai Knight. He is not worried about combat power at all, but he does not have 3 heads and 6 arms, and sometimes he really can't get away. He thought of Henry and David. Oh, forget it. I don't know how long it will take until they become talents. Water from afar cannot save the thirsty people nearby. There is no city wall in the southwest wasteland, and there is no need to waste money on building a city wall. Anyway, there are enough manpower now, so Daniel asked them to design traps. In this way, it can at least relieve the pressure, and the group of soldiers has nothing to do except training. It is easy for them to get into trouble if they stay together for a long time. As more and more houses were built and the number of people increased, Daniel Hawkins counted nearly 200 people. Daniel Hawkins said, "That's enough." "Enough," said Rob Hawkins. "Do you know how many there are?" "There were about 500 of them," Daniel Hawkins said. "Hey," Rob Hawkins asked, "how do you know?" "Because I was a kid," Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about that." "Okay, even if you say the other party has 500 people, we only have 200 people. Besides, how many wizards do they have?" Daniel Hawkins thought about it. He killed 3 wizards when he was a young boy, and he killed 2 more in the last battle. During this time, including those recruited by the Tosai Knights, thinking of this, he said, "About 10. Look, you are the only wizard we have." Rob Hawkins said, "How can we break into their castle in this case?" "Who said I wanted their castle?" Daniel Hawkins said. "Hey," Rob Hawkins said, "if you don't attack the castle, you won't officially occupy this land." "Who said that?" Daniel Hawkins asked. "Well," Rob Hawkins said, "it's been like this since ancient times." "This has been the case since ancient times, so is it right?" Daniel Hawkins laughed. Rob Hawkins was really confused when faced with these words, but his son had never made him scratch his head before, especially when it came to money. He still hasn't figured out where his son got so much money. Then the son's attitude towards the soldiers was completely unlike that of a lord and aristocrat. After getting to know the soldiers, he often talked and laughed with them. He was very opposed to this because it would weaken the lord's prestige. And every time Daniel Hawkins faced his father's persuasion, he would always say that as long as the benefits were enough, they would naturally choose who to work with. Who can have trouble with money? Rob Hawkins didn't understand. If you do this, you will have no sense of honor at all, and the nobility in your heart will be gone. What is the difference between this and mercenaries? Daniel replied, "Good birds choose trees to live in, so what's wrong with being mercenaries? If I don't have the ability to help my subjects live a good life, wouldn't it be right for them to leave? I still want to think about the current problem. We are not trying to capture the castle, but we are trying to solve the water source problem." Chapter 128. The Hawkins family is not simple. When the first team of Night Toss did not return for a long time, and another team was sent later, but still failed to return, he became more cautious. So he ordered the third team not to destroy them, but simply to spy on them. When he learned that the temporary wooden houses and tents in the southwest wasteland belonged to the Hawkins family, he couldn't help laughing. "I didn't expect that Baron Hawkins would really come to fight me. How many people are there?" "According to the tents, there are about 100 people," the warrior said. Night Toss laughed even louder. "Not to mention that they have more people, just guarding this castle. No matter how talented Daniel Hawkins is, they can't attack. More than 100 people want to seize my castle." Night Tosser said, "Humph, you are overestimating yourself. A young man is a young man." Millie Tosser said at the side, "Father. I know, I won't kill him." Night Tosser said, "But I can't let them hang around under my nose." After that, he arranged 5 warriors, 5 wizards and 190 soldiers to raise Daniel Hawkins' temporary military camp to the ground. Of course, he finally issued an order: Daniel Hawkins' life can be saved first. Just as Night Tosser was waiting for the victory report and Millie Tosser was waiting for her future husband, a wounded warrior came back to report that they were defeated. "Impossible, absolutely impossible!" Night Tosser shouted, "We have twice as many people as them. They don't have a city wall yet, and their weapons are better than theirs. We have 5 wizards alone. They can gather so many people in such a short time. It's obvious that they are just a group of mercenaries. Most of them are probably homeless people, ha ha ha. Sir Knight, this is the problem. Although they don't have a city wall, they have dug traps, and their weapons are no worse than ours. Even each of their soldiers has a magic identification stone. They also. What else? Tell me quickly. Night Tosser shouted. They are also very brave. They don't look like mercenaries who are greedy for money. As long as Daniel Hawkins yells, their morale will be very high, just like a group of dead soldiers, fighting for their lives. After the soldier finished speaking, he realized that he seemed to have said the wrong thing. They lost the fight, which proved that they were not even as good as mercenaries. Then where are the wizards? Millie Tosser said, where are our wizards? All the wizards were killed by Daniel Hawkins when the fight started. The warrior said, once our wizard died, our morale collapsed immediately. Daniel Hawkins is like. Like what? Night Tosser said angrily, talk. Daniel Hawkins' magic is too terrifying. He is like a devil. As long as you are touched by his magic, you are basically dead. If it weren't for our armor's high magic resistance, we could still hold on for a while, but we couldn't stand their crazy warriors, so I can only let them retreat first. The whole hall was unusually silent, but no matter how angry Night Tosser was, he knew that withdrawing was the most correct choice. Otherwise, even if this batch of troops was completely wiped out, at least the loss would not be so heavy if they withdrew. His tone returned to calm, and he said to the soldiers, I know, you should take a good rest after you go down. Night Toss fell heavily on his seat, frowning, and glanced at his daughter and said, it seems that your fiancé is not so easy to catch, and it is even less likely to die. Millie Toss knew that her father was speaking in a sarcastic way, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. Night Toss was very curious about where Daniel Hawkins got so much money and which family he was backed by. However, one thing he was very clear about was that he could not act rashly next, and he must not underestimate Daniel. He looked at the only 5 wizards left in the hall and said, no matter how powerful the opponent is, in fact, to put it bluntly, the real problem is Daniel Hawkins, the genius wizard. Who among you is sure to kill him? This time, Night Toss did not emphasize leaving Daniel Hawkins alive. The wizards in the audience looked at each other, and they were all sighing in their hearts. Daniel Hawkins could kill 5 of them at the same time. If they went up, it would be like an egg hitting a stone. So, you are all trash. Seeing that no one was talking, Night Tosser could not help but angrily said, I spent so much money to support you on weekdays, but now that something really happened, you can't do it. Oh, the wizards all lowered their heads. It's not that we are useless, but the opponent is too strong. At this time, Millie Tosser said, if Danny is here, it would be great. Everyone nodded when they heard it, including Night Tosser who was thoughtful. Yes, if Danny is here, although he may not be able to win, he can still compete with Daniel Hawkins. At this moment, those wizards are no longer jealous of Danny. However, where should they go to call Danny back now? One wizard said, we can continue to recruit wizards, and we can withdraw the killing order against Danny. A playboy like Danny will definitely find a way to make more money when he runs out of money. Also, we still have to recruit wizards. We can't save money at this time. We can't beat 1, 3, or 5 wizards, but what if there are 10? If 10 doesn't work, then there will be 20. I don't believe we can't beat Daniel Hawkins. And we have taken advantage of the terrain. If it doesn't work, we will just stay in the castle. What can he do to us? That's right. The warrior on the side said, we are just fighting a defensive battle. We can wear them out. Sir Knight, whether it is offense or defense, it is in our favor now. Night Toss clenched his fist and supported his chin, thinking about what they said, which was indeed very reasonable. Why should he go to face Daniel Hawkins head on now? It would be better to wait until they can't bear it anymore and take the initiative to deliver themselves to the door. Moreover, although it is a bit costly to recruit more wizards, he can just lose some face and go to Count Rossi to talk about it. If it doesn't work, he still has some antiques and private goods, which can be sold. Millie Tosser was in a complicated mood and couldn't help but say, Father, I think we can negotiate with Daniel Hawkins. Negotiate? Night Tosser asked, he has killed many of my people, what is there to negotiate? Chapter 129, Not interested in being a live-in son-in-law. Daniel Hawkins never thought that Night Toss would send an envoy. The envoy's purpose was very simple. He first told Daniel Hawkins about his current predicament in the wasteland, and then proposed attractive conditions. He said, Baron, Our Lady admires you very much. Our Night Toss is willing to marry his daughter to you, and promises that you will have no worries about food and clothing in your life, as long as you are willing to join our knight. When the warriors of the Hawkins family heard this, they all gnashed their teeth in hatred, and the envoy said some conditions later. They were afraid that the Baron would really agree. The envoy even took out the self-portrait of the eldest lady, who was indeed a charming beauty. Daniel Hawkins laughed and said, "You can also say that I am a baron. How can a baron join a knight?" The envoy said disapprovingly, "Our knight will soon not be a knight, he will be a viscount." "Oh, who gave him the title?" Daniel Hawkins asked. The messenger did not answer this question directly. He also knew that it would be more disadvantageous to continue talking, so he just said, "I still hope that the Baron will think about it carefully, otherwise your final outcome will be death." When the soldiers in the tent heard this, they drew their swords and pointed at the messenger and cursed, "Believe it or not, I will kill you." Facing this scene, the messenger was not afraid, but just said, "Kill me if you have the guts." Daniel Hawkins certainly would not do such a stupid thing as killing the messenger, otherwise he would be fooled by them. He just said, "First of all, the western area of Town was originally my fiefdom, which was given to me by the king himself. Everyone can testify to this. Therefore, my group is a righteous army, and the ancient gods will stand on my side. Secondly, you are right. I don't want to increase casualties, but I will not be your consort. Even if I want to marry your eldest daughter, it will not be in this way. I am not interested in being a son-in-law." The messenger said, "So, Lord Baron, you refuse?" Daniel Hawkins shook his head and said, "I can provide another plan, that is, return the West District to me, and Knight Toss returns to his original North District. Otherwise, this battle is inevitable, and it is nothing more than a life and death struggle. Lord Baron, I don't think Knight Toss will do the condition you mentioned." The messenger wanted to make a final persuasion, "Please listen to my advice, you can't afford it." Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "Whether I can afford it or not, then don't bother with you. Send me out." Lord Baron said, "Well." The soldiers shouted. The messenger listened to the soldiers' full-spirited roar outside, which had not been heard in Toss's military camp for a long time. After the messenger returned, he relayed Daniel Hawkins' words to Knight Tosser and all the warriors and wizards in the hall. Knight Tosser became angrier and angrier as he listened, and smashed the wine glass in his hand to the ground. "Daniel Hawkins, you are really arrogant. You want me to go back to the North District? Bullshit." Millie Tosser was also very angry and screamed and cursed, "He doesn't want such good conditions from me. Did you show him my portrait?" The messenger nodded and said, "I showed him. Is he not satisfied?" Millie Tosser shouted. "I don't know." The messenger said, "But he said he is not interested in being a live-in son-in-law." Millie Toss could not help but sneer when she heard it. "Well, Daniel Hawkins, you are shameless. There are so many people lining up to be a live-in son-in-law. He really thinks he is a genius and thinks he can do everything. Father, we can't let him go." Knight Toss said, "You don't need to tell me. A 20-year-old brat is actually provoking me. Okay, let's fight and see who can outlast who. Daniel Hawkins, don't let me see you, otherwise I will tear you to pieces." Daniel Hawkins found that Knight Toss had not sent anyone to attack for a long time. He understood that the other party was playing a war of attrition with him. If this is true, it is really hurtful to him. And he found that while he was recruiting, Knight Toss would also recruit. No matter how much he recruited, he would not have more than Knight Toss. Especially the transportation of food and water, and it had to be transported from downtown, which was the biggest consumption. Moreover, his only trusted father, Robert Hawkins, is also very busy now. He has to recruit people, train new soldiers, and arrange people to dig traps. He still has to do this himself. Now Knight Toss is hiding in the castle like a turtle. Even if Daniel Hawkins issues a challenge to him, he will not fight. Daniel Hawkins smiled. This is even better. He ordered all the troops to be assembled and headed directly to the west of Town. The alarm sounded in Knight Toss's castle, and the soldiers guarding the town and outside the town also received orders and retreated to the castle. As for the civilians, Knight Toss didn't care about their lives at all. Anyway, they were all hungry people. They couldn't fight or work, and they would starve to death sooner or later. The tavern owner had been approved to take his family into the castle, but he refused. Thinking about the situation of the Tosser soldiers, it was like a sheep entering a tiger's mouth. If they were all going to die, they might as well die in their own tavern. The townspeople were terrified and hid in their houses, picking up rakes, brooms, and kitchen knives to protect themselves. Some people who were starving to the point of skin and bones didn't care. They could kill or chop them up as they pleased. Just as the townspeople were praying and trembling against the door, imagining that Hawkins' army would kill, rape and plunder, they heard a voice outside the house shouting, "Bread, there is bread, who wants bread?" The townspeople stuck their heads out of the window and saw several soldiers holding bread and shouting outside. There was no fighting, no screaming, and no arrogant laughter from the soldiers. There were only down-to-earth shouts, "Bread, those who are hungry can come and eat bread, it's free." Despite this, the townspeople still wondered if these soldiers wanted to trick them out and then capture them as prisoners, slaughter them, and rape them. After all, Night Toss's group of soldiers did this when they came, so they didn't dare to believe it easily. They also knew that their broken houses could not stop them, but they still had to have basic resistance. They could kill them, but they couldn't let them kill them too easily. Just when they didn't believe it, a starving man walked up to them and said, "Is there really bread to eat?" Chapter 130. Sooner or later it will be ours. Inside Toss Castle, some soldiers have started to complain. At first, Night Toss would ask his soldiers, and the soldiers would arrange their captains to punish the soldiers who complained. At first, it was somewhat useful, but as the food in the castle became less and less, the food became worse and worse, and a group of hot-blooded soldiers were crowded in, so their complaints gradually turned into complaints. The soldiers continued to punish? Sorry, they really couldn't punish, because even the captain began to complain. The complaints became louder and louder, and the number of people complaining increased. Regarding food, Night Toss and related internal high-level officials were not affected in any way, because wizards could still teleport freely. The wizards recruited by Night Toss finally had a place to use their skills. They were not asked to fight with Daniel Hawkins, but to bring some food back by the way when teleporting. Their role was to deliver takeout. Night Toss never thought that he originally wanted to consume Daniel Hawkins in the southwest wasteland, but now he was consuming himself in turn. He didn't expect Daniel Hawkins to not attack the castle. Since ancient times, there has never been a lord who didn't want a castle. Only by occupying the castle can you truly occupy the land, and the people of the world will truly recognize you as a lord. I didn't expect it, I really didn't expect that Daniel Hawkins would just surround the castle, station in the town with his soldiers, and distribute food to his subjects for free. No, according to the wizard's report, the people of Town no longer recognize Night Toss, and these people only recognize Lord Baron Hawkins. After all, Baron Hawkins is the one who really pulled these people out of hunger. Night Toss disagreed, "Get the recognition of those hungry people and the untouchables? Haha, it doesn't matter if these people don't recognize you. The problem is that now even his soldiers have begun to disrespect him. The prestige of the warriors has also begun to decline, because these soldiers believe that the warriors and wizards can eat and drink well, sleep in single rooms, and have servants to serve them. And these soldiers can only eat bread every day, how can they bear it, and Mei Niang hasn't come for a long time." These are all what Daniel Hawkins expected. Wizards can teleport out of the castle, but they can't teleport out with everyone. In addition, Daniel Hawkins also began to arrange for bards to spread the situation of the battle in Dawn Town. Generally speaking, it is now rumored that Night Toss has fallen into a big dilemma and a mutiny is imminent. Daniel Hawkins did this for another reason, which is to facilitate his recruitment of more talents. He already has 15 real warriors, although their combat power is not as good as his father Rob Hawkins, and they are also more expensive. But as a lord without a castle, he is already very satisfied. What he needs now is more wizards. Because no matter how powerful he is, he doesn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, and he can't take care of too much. Now at the critical moment, he dare not leave Town easily. He is afraid that once he leaves, the soldiers and wizards in the castle will rush out and fight with them. It is precisely because of his genius who has won several battles and killed several wizards that they are still afraid. As for Night Tosser, under the propaganda of the bard, he could not recruit any new wizards. Even the old wizards, 2 of them never came back after delivering takeout a few times. Seeing this, the remaining wizards and warriors secretly colluded. "If you want to leave, can you take me with you? Stop talking nonsense and give me money." "Okay, I'll give you a deposit first." The reason they stayed was to see if they could get more money from Night Tosser. On the contrary, when the slum wizards of the Dawn Wizard Academy heard the bard's propaganda, they responded one after another. Wow, Big Brother is fighting. I'm so angry, it's obviously Big Brother's territory. Let's go to Big Brother. Wait, does Big Brother need us? What if we cause trouble? Let's go and take a look first. If Big Brother doesn't need us, we'll go. That's right. Since it's a war, I suggest that those in the 4th grade and below should not join in the fun. Agree. But I still have a commission. Forget it, forget his commission, let's support Big Brother. Rob Hawkins was the first one who disagreed with not attacking the castle, and he disagreed with staying in the town for a long time. He couldn't understand many of his son's behaviors. He could understand the need for water, but why should he give bread to the townspeople for free? For his questions, Daniel Hawkins smiled at him and had almost no explanation. But as time went on, seeing the townspeople's support for them, and then seeing the soldiers in the castle become trapped beasts, they guarded the door, and as long as they dared to come out, Robert Hawkins and the soldiers began to kill them. There was no need for any tactics at all, just killing them in batches, it was so comfortable. In addition, he could hear the complaints of the soldiers inside the castle from time to time, and combined with his son's money to pay the bard, his attitude towards his son changed greatly, from praise to admiration. Looking at Daniel Hawkins, who was at ease and commanded with moderation, he became more and more confused. This was not the weak and timid Daniel who could only be a follower before. No matter what, Rob Hawkins did not refute any of his son's words, and he did not even ask why to make his son explain for a long time. And he listened to the townspeople's praise for them. Regardless of whether it was false or just for a piece of bread, he seemed to understand what his son said to him, "What's the castle? He who wins the hearts of the people wins the world. If we win the hearts of the people, the castle will be ours sooner or later." Now, as long as it is arranged by his son himself, no matter how unreasonable it sounds, he will directly execute it without asking why. Alas, just when Daniel Hawkins was still having a headache about recruiting wizards, he heard an urgent voice outside the door, "Enemy wizards are invading! Enemy wizards are invading!" When the townspeople heard it, they all hid in the house. The soldiers gathered and surrounded them. "I just heard this group of people say. I'm here to see my big brother, Baron Hawkins." Daniel Hawkins put down the account book and went out to see that it was his classmates from the Dawn Wizard Academy. He couldn't help but laugh and said, "Why are you here, big brother?" A total of 3 wizards came, and they all went up to explain the whole story, the reasons and motives for coming. Daniel Hawkins looked at the soldiers holding weapons and said quickly, "Put down your weapons, we are all our own people." The soldiers were relieved when they saw the attitude of the bard towards them, and they put down their weapons one after another. Daniel Hawkins looked at their arrival and couldn't help but sigh that the bard's money was not wasted. Chapter 131. You can choose any. Nitose spent a lot of money this time and invited Count Rossi to spend 2 days at the Seraphia custom shop. Seeing that Count Rossi was having so much fun and was about to leave, he said with an apologetic smile, "Your Majesty, you're welcome. You can play for a few more days. All the expenses will be borne by me." Count Rossi smiled and said, "Dmitri, why are you doing this?" "Oh, I have always been taken care of by you, and now I just want to thank you and repay you." Nitose smiled apologetically and poured him wine. Count Rossi nodded and said, "Okay, you are sensible, then let's play for a few more days." After saying that, he finished the wine glass, then hugged the 2 beauties and continued to enter the room. Nitose was anxious. He was now forced into a difficult situation by Baron Hawkins. He also drank the beer, but Count Rossi drank the happy wine, while he drank the sad wine. He remembered what his daughter Millie said to him a few days ago, "Father, how about we go back to the North District? We can discuss with Baron Hawkins to allow our troops to pass." Why didn't he want to do this? Millie had been studying in Seraphia and had no idea about the situation in Sonk Town. The reason why he annexed the Western District and moved his troops to the Western District was that the Western District was closer to Chenexai Town and a little wealthier. The more important reason was that his castle in the Northern District was occupied by the Shadow Shout Beast. If he hadn't been quick enough, he would have died just like the lords of the Southern District. There were only a few people in the North District, but after a Shadow Howler Beast took over the castle, all the townspeople who were dead, injured or not died fled to the West District. In other words, there was no way he could move troops from the North District like Millie said, since all his belongings were here in the West District. Special brew, the entire Sonk Town is not a place for people to live at all. Thinking of this, Naitose couldn't help clenching his fists and pounding the table. If it weren't for his leadership, the land of Songke town would have been occupied by strange monsters in the forest. It was he who had defended the land for the king and protected the townspeople from the monsters of the forest, all to his credit. As for Daniel Hawkins, he just won a game and came to seize his fruits. He was unwilling to give in. He was really unwilling to do so. Although he asked Count Rossi to play for a few more days, he was very anxious. It was not because he was too poor to pay the bill. He was not short of money, and most of the money was funded by Count Rossi. It's like he took the Earl's money and invited the Earl here to play with the maiden. Count Rossi certainly understands that, and he also knows that he can no longer get back the money he invested in Naitose, so he thought about playing with more maidens so that he would not suffer such a loss. To be honest, Count Rossi doesn't really care who the Lord of Songke town is, it's just a broken place anyway. The reason why he supported the Tosei Knights was just to give Earl Hawthorn face and help his brother out. And now, he is also very clear about the current battle situation, and the Tosei Knights have reached their end. Moreover, Earl Hawthorn also started to ignore this matter. In this case, he didn't care even more. Of course, it would be better if some costs could be recovered. Naitose was not in the mood to play with Mei Niang. He was only in the mood to wait for the movement in Count Rossi's house. When the charming girls came out, he didn't care about anything and rushed in immediately. "I'll go, Dmitri, what are you doing?" Count Rossi was frightened. He hadn't even put on his clothes yet. He hadn't been on the battlefield for a long time. He was dangling around with a white and tender belly. "Can shake out oil." Naitose knelt down and said, "My lord, please help me. If you help me get through this difficulty, I will be your most loyal servant." Upon seeing this, Count Rossi said calmly, "Dmitri, you have always been my most loyal servant." When Naitose heard this, he felt that something was wrong, but he only heard Count Rossi continue, "But you also know that I have helped you a lot in this matter. I have spent a lot of money on you, and even I also found the best wizard for you, look at what you look like now. Your Majesty, you can't blame me for this." Naitose quickly defended, that Daniel Hawkins is not a genius at all, he is just like a monster. None of the wizards you sent me are his opponents. Count Rossi was very unhappy when he heard this, "So, you blame me? Don't dare, Lord Earl, I didn't mean that." Naitose was really angry. This was the first time he had knelt down like this. Although his knight level was the lowest, if it hadn't been for Daniel Hawkins' invasion, he would have been. He can be a decent lord in Song Town, and everyone will treat him politely. Count Rossi said angrily, "Humph, you obviously meant that." He knew that Naitose invited him to the custom shop to get more support from him and to shed more blood. Now that there is no need for the Tosei Knight to save him, he just takes this opportunity to drive him away so that he will not bother him in the future. If Naitose can really get out of this predicament, it won't be too late to use him again. After all, he needs to make him a viscount himself. He continued to say angrily, "You said that the wizards I gave you couldn't defeat Baron Hawkins, but what about the wizards you recruited yourself? Also, can't you even defeat Hawkins' warriors? Your numbers are greater than his. What more can't be beat? You still have a castle." Naitose complained bitterly, "Soldiers, I am certainly not afraid of them, but they are surrounding me now. As soon as they show up, they will rush forward." He told Count Rossi all his current battle situation. After hearing this, Count Rossi couldn't help but sigh that Daniel Hawkins was really cunning. Instead of taking down the castle first, he took down the untouchables in the town first and distributed food for free. They were all praising Baron Hawkins. In fact, looking at it this way, Baron Hawkins has occupied Songke town. But there is a question, where did Daniel Hawkins get so much money? Naitose was also puzzled by this problem. He just cried and begged Count Rossi to send troops to rescue him. As long as Count Rossi was willing to send troops, he would open the castle, attack Songke town from both front and back, and equip himself with better weapons. Magic resistance armor. Once the number of soldiers increased, he didn't believe that Daniel Hawkins could not be dealt with. Naitose took out the map and analyzed and planned Count Rossi in great detail. He was very confident that as long as he implemented his plan, this battle would be won. Count Rossi listened expressionlessly, and after a long time he said leisurely, "If I win, what benefits will I get?" Naitose said, "I still have many treasures. Lord Count, you can choose whatever you want when the time comes." Chapter 132. I want to transfer to another school. Count Rossi didn't care. I don't care about your treasure. But what? Sir Earl, as long as you help me, I can agree to any request. Count Rossi glanced at him, smiled and waved his hand. Forget it, you can't do it. Lord Earl, I am very determined, and I will definitely win this time. Just say whatever you want. I will definitely be able to do it. I want your daughter to stay with me for one night, can you do it? Count Rossi said coldly. What? Nitose looked surprised. Count Rossi, please stop joking. His heart was already filled with anger. Damn you, you damn thief, you dare to attack my daughter. Now he really wants to use his sword to kill the fat Earl was beheaded. That's right, you can't do it at all. Count Rossi mocked. Nitose was still somewhat humane. He stood up directly, put his hand on the hilt of his sword and held it tightly, staring at the Count fiercely. Count Rossi looked at the angry-looking Nitose, and he was a little scared. After all, he was naked now. Even if he had a weapon in his hand, he hadn't been on the battlefield for many years. Coupled with his age, he couldn't do it. Nitose. But as a count, Tang Tang can show his belly, but not his timidity, so he pretended to be relaxed and said, "Oh, Dmitri, I was just joking. Look at you, you are anxious again. I was just joking. Besides, even if you are willing, your daughter is not willing. Your daughter is a witch in Seraphia, and I can't afford to offend her." Seeing that Nitose still had a tense look on his face and his hand was still on the hilt of his sword, he quickly said, "Oh, okay, I'll help you and you should be able to do it." Hearing this, Nitose relaxed a little and took his hand away from the hilt of his sword. "So, Lord Earl, are you willing to send troops?" "You can send troops, but you can't use my name, you can only use your name," Count Rossi said while getting dressed. Facing the tense atmosphere just now, he had no interest at all now and just wanted to go back quickly. Nitose also softened his tone, "This is no problem. If possible, I suggest that we arrange more wizards and prepare magic resistance." Okay, you don't need to say anything," Count Rossi said, "first bring me all your antique treasures." When Nitose heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief, which meant that Count Rossi would not break his promise. "This is no problem, I will send it to you immediately. I'll give you half an hour." Just when Nitose returned to his castle and counted his antique treasures with his daughter Millie, Millie asked him, "Will Count Rossi really send troops? If he collects our treasures, then really what should I do if I break my promise?" Nitose was distraught. "Then what else can we do? Apart from trusting Count Rossi, we have no better way now." Then he told his daughter everything about the situation in the North District. After hearing this, Millie Tose's eyes widened. It turned out that they had no way out. She said, "Father, how about this? Let's talk to Daniel Hawkins again, at least let our army once we can dispatch, we can take the army back to the North District. With this army, we should be able to kill the Shadowthroat beast. Even if we can't kill it, we can just drive it away. Even if we can't drive it away, we can be stationed outside the castle like Daniel Hawkins did." Millie Tose continued, "Besides, these treasures have already been this is our last possession. With these, we can still stand up, but we cannot give these to Count Rossi." Nitose listened to his daughter Millie's words. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but nod in agreement. The anxiety in his heart also eased a lot. "Millie, it seems that you are my real treasure." Count Rossi waited at home and couldn't wait for Nitose to deliver the treasure. He couldn't help but said angrily, "Dmitri, you stinky boy." His troops were all arranged, but he had another instruction, which was to just wait and see, don't take action. Unless the Tosai knights really had the upper hand, if the disparity in strength was still too great, there was no need to say anything and just retreat. Count Rossi's goal is very simple, which is to get some money back from Knight Tos, but now it's good, since Ben can't come back, then his troops don't need to be sent out. He forcibly comforted himself and said, "Okay, just think of it as saving some trouble, and the money you spent before will be used as a favor to sell to Earl Hawthorne. With this money, you can take the friendship with Earl Hawthorne a step further, so it's worth it." Earl Hawthorne has actually been paying attention to the situation in Sonk Town. He never expected that Daniel Hawkins would actually dare to go and claim the land and actually form a small army. Even if it was an army, it would be fine. Now he actually forced Dmitry Toze to a dead end. This was really beyond his expectation, and his mood was very complicated. His original intention was to stumble Daniel Hawkins, but in fact, his goal had been achieved. However, his stumbling block was successful, but Daniel Hawkins became stronger because of it. He looked at his two unfulfilled sons and scolded them, "Look, a boy can lead troops to fight now. What are you still doing?" Mario Hawthorne said, "Then we go to war too." Alan Hawthorne also said, "Father, don't worry, we will be stronger and sooner or later we will trample Daniel Hawkins to the ground." Earl Hawthorne nodded and said, "That's about right. Mario, look at your brother, at least he is more ambitious than you." Mario Hawthorne glanced at his younger brother, said "Oh," and then said nothing more. He knew that without absolute strength, no matter how much he said, it would be useless. Mario was secretly competing in his heart. He thought that he still had hope of defeating Daniel, because no matter how powerful Daniel was, he was only an ice magician, and he was a lightning magician. He plans to learn from experience and become stronger next time to challenge Daniel Hawkins. By then he will be his father's proudest son again. So how to become stronger is nothing more than to work harder, be more diligent, hire the best teachers, and go to the best academy. So he mustered up the courage to say to Count Hawthorne, "Father, I want to go to Seraphia Wizard Academy." When Earl Hawthorne heard this, he immediately gave a big bag to his eldest son. "You are so embarrassed, you prodigal son, you still think I didn't spend enough money." When Mario Hawthorne heard this, a burst of anger arose. "You said I wanted to defeat Daniel Hawkins. Now I want to become stronger, but you don't give it. Without a good teacher, how can I become stronger? Strong? How can I defeat Daniel Hawkins?" After hearing this, Alan Hawthorne said leisurely, "Father, I want to go too." Chapter 133. Advanced Skin. Daniel Hawkins finally had the opportunity to experience the skill of wisdom inheritance purchased in the System Mall. I can only say that this skill is really worth it. Rob Hawkins trained his warriors, while Daniel Hawkins trained his three newly joined wizards Simon, André, and Jacques. Although they were not graduates of prestigious schools, their magic strength was also a bit lacking, at least compared with the wizards in Toss Castle, not to mention Millie Toss. But it doesn't matter, the poor magic strength can be equipped with better equipment, that is, Krypton Gold. Daniel Hawkins arranged for them advanced robes and staffs. Simon, André, and Jacques' eyes almost popped out when they saw the equipment prepared by Baron Hawkins for them. When they held the advanced robes and staffs with both hands, they were even more excited and trembling. But they still tried to steady their hands to prevent the robes and staffs from falling to the ground. Oh my god, they have always used wands and wore low-level robes, which are just enough to wear. High-level robes and staffs. Simon said excitedly, "Baron, we will keep them properly, and I will return them to you intact after the war." André and Jacques nodded, reluctant to take their eyes off the high-level robes and staffs. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "These are all for you, you can do whatever you want with them. And during this period, I will pay you every month, and when everything is settled, I will also give you corresponding bonuses. If you still want to follow me at that time, I will reset your salary. I can guarantee that it will not be lower than what you get as a commission or work in the Wizard Association." "Ah! These are all for us." André said, "This is too expensive, just one robe is enough for me to take 50 commissions, plus the staff, that is, God, 100 commissions. And it has to be a life-threatening commission." Jacques added. Daniel Hawkins watched them put on robes and equipped with staffs, looking at each other, praising each other, and bragging to each other. "I look better than you. I am the most handsome. Let's not talk about whether I am handsome or not. I feel invincible now. When I go to war, I want to release a blizzard first." At this time, they found that Daniel was not wearing high-level robes or high-level staffs, so they asked, "Baron, why don't you buy yourself a set of equipment?" "Yes, you are so simple, we are embarrassed to wear such high-level things." "Yes," Jacques said, and was about to take it off. "Lord, I am the weakest here, and these high-level suits are a waste for me." "Lord, you wear them." Daniel Hawkins crossed his legs and said while shaking his legs, "Oh, why are you being polite to me? As everyone knows, I am a genius. I don't need to wear that thing at all." After listening to what the Baron said, they gave up. They are now like a primary school student who gets a legendary skin, a fisherman who catches a big fish, or a boy who has a 4090 and a PS5 in his hand, and they have reached the peak of their lives. Daniel Hawkins looked at their numbers, which had increased 5 times from the original. Okay, the magic level was enough, so he said, next, I will teach you a magic skill. When the 3 of them heard it, they looked at each other. Simon asked, Baron, isn't it a bit too late to learn it now? And I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, and it's not that easy to learn a skill. It's better to learn it after everything is settled, as you said. André also agreed, yes, after all, we are here to help you. Jacques also said, let's focus on the castle now. It is not recommended to distract our attention. We should be alert. Especially the wizards in the castle, they can teleport, and it is easy for them to suddenly appear in front of us and give us a sneak attack. Therefore, we must be alert. I asked you to learn, and that's it. Why so much nonsense? Daniel Hawkins shouted. Millie Toss never thought that meeting her male god Daniel Hawkins would be a negotiation meeting. Night Tosser wanted to show his utmost sincerity, so he sent his daughter to negotiate in person. Rather than saying this was a negotiation, it was more like Night Tosser's unilateral plea for mercy. Millie Tosser had imagined many scenes of meeting Daniel Hawkins, on a romantic hill, in a bustling market, or in a corner of the castle of Seraphia Wizard Academy. Anyway, it would be a date, a tryst, or a private meeting, but it would not be a mutually hostile negotiation. After all, in Millie Tosser's original idea, Daniel Hawkins was only worthy of being their son-in-law, and it was in her pocket. Oh my goodness, the cooked duck flew away? No, she thought, the duck might not have been cooked at all. During the days when the castle was besieged, although she could teleport out, she was worried and had to be on guard against the Hawkins family at all times. What else could she do except bring some takeout to her father or take her father to see the Earl? She even began to miss the days at Seraphia Wizard Academy, where she was carefree, took commissions from time to time, and could work at the Wizard Association. Now, because of this incident, her job at the Wizard Association is gone. She also gradually changed from a vigorous and resolute queen to a complaining woman. However, she was going to meet Daniel Hawkins around 6 p.m., so she planned to dress up and show her best side. But why did she have to meet around 6 p.m.? In the letter, Daniel Hawkins also emphasized that he had to be on an empty stomach. Could it be that he wanted to meet me for dinner? What a strange guy, now they are fighting a territorial war. Are all geniuses so strange? Just as she was complaining, she thought of having dinner with Daniel Hawkins, and her heartbeat quickened and her face flushed. Hate it, now it's a negotiation, and she is now carrying the family mission. This kind of fangirl state is not good, God. She looked at herself in the mirror and muttered to herself, Millie, where is your previous attitude and momentum? Yes, momentum, tonight I will let Daniel Hawkins know that our Tosser family is not easy to mess with. Only when it is established under an equal relationship can it be called negotiation, and this is her task tonight, to let Daniel Hawkins understand that the Tosser family and the Hawkins family are honorable and equal. Her mind was in a mess, and she was thinking while dressing up, taking off and changing clothes, and she had changed more than 10 sets. More importantly, she also took a special bath. Chapter 134. A good feeling. This negotiation will be completely different from what Millie Toze expected. They will be held at the junction between castles. Daniel Hawkins also built a temporary shed specially for this purpose. Both of them have the most capable warriors guarding them. The person guarding Daniel Hawkins, needless to say, must be his father Rob Hawkins, the former owner of the West District of Songkei Town. After Millie Toze met Daniel Hawkins, even though she was 3 years older than him, it was impossible to say that she wasn't nervous. After all, she was now in close contact with Daniel Hawkins, and he was even more handsome than she had seen on the field. She suppressed her emotions and couldn't reveal her admiration for him. She always reminded herself to be normal. Moreover, she also planned to strike first and use her royal sister-like aura to overwhelm him. She only heard her raise her voice and said, Lord Baron, I know you are very busy, and my time is also very tight, so let's not talk nonsense. I hope this time for our confrontation. Daniel Hawkins stretched out his hand to interrupt her, you haven't eaten yet. This is not a fair negotiation. Whether it is the situation or personal emotions, Daniel Hawkins is very stable. After all, he had sneaked into her life while disguised as Danny, and he knew very well Millie Toze's attitude towards him. This is a negotiation meeting and a meeting for idol fans. Ha ha ha, Daniel Hawkins thought, in this case, how could she take the initiative? And he also knew very well that the higher her voice sounded and the stronger her aura, the more guilty she was. Faced with Daniel Hawkins' question, Millie Tozay shook her head. Daniel Hawkins nodded and said slowly, "Very good, let's talk while eating. How could there be anything delicious in such a remote town?" I saw Daniel Hawkins rolling up his sleeves and walking to a temporary stove stand, which was filled with charcoal and had an iron mesh erected on top. What is he going to do? Millie Tozay thought. At this time, Daniel Hawkins said to his father Rob, "It's time to go." Millie Tozay and the soldiers around her were shocked. Could they get on? What does it mean to be ready? Is it possible that they are going to attack the castle now? Oh, how despicable! Millie Tozay thought of this, and couldn't help but stand up alertly, ready to release the spell at any time, and then looked at Daniel Hawkins with disdain. She looked at the soldiers running towards them in the distance. Haha, it seemed that Daniel Hawkins didn't want to negotiate anymore, he just wanted to lure her out and then defeat her. Despicable, so despicable, no honor at all. Just when Millie Tozay was planning to strike first, she was ready to take action. Daniel Hawkins felt her magic power surge behind him, so he turned around and smiled at her. "Don't worry, the meat will come soon." Meat? Millie Tozay glanced at the warrior beside her. Although her warrior's hand was still on the hilt of the sword, his face was blank. After a while, soldiers from the Hawkins family were seen carrying boxes of meat. Daniel Hawkins originally wanted to use fire to light the stove, but in order to hide his strength, he decided not to do it, so he asked the soldiers to use flint to light the fire. He fanned the stove while wiping his sweat. Later, he felt that his robe was in the way, so he simply took off his robe, rolled up his white long-sleeved shirt, and blew on the stove from time to time. Then, I saw him putting skewers of meat in the box on the oven. "Ah!" Millie Tozay shouted after seeing what was going on, "Lord Baron, are you cooking?" "Yes." Daniel Hawkins turned to look at her and continued to bake. "It will be eaten soon, just wait a moment." This scene was completely unexpected by Millie Tozay. "Baron, how can you cook by yourself? This is against the rules." "Okay." Daniel Hawkins picked up a skewer of grilled meat and asked, "Do you like spicy food?" Millie Tozay was so nervous that she didn't even eat breakfast or lunch. Now that she could smell the aroma of barbecue, she couldn't continue what she just said and nodded quickly. Daniel Hawkins smiled. He picked up 2 wooden jars and took turns throwing them at the meat skewers, and then handed the meat skewers to her. "Plates?" asked Millie Tozay. "I don't have any plates, and I don't have any cutlery." "No, just take it and eat it." Daniel Hawkins said. "Why are you still standing there? Just take it." He observed the oven from time to time. "Hurry up, or they will burn." At his urging, Millie Tozay quickly took the meat skewers. How could she eat without cutlery? She was a noble and a lady. She took a bite. Oh my god, her eyes widened. 3 times 5 divided 2, the meat skewers were only all that's left is the bamboo sticks. This is so delicious. Millie Tozay couldn't help but ask, "Lord Baron, what kind of meat is this?" "Beef," Daniel Hawkins said, "just ordinary beef." "I've never had beef that tasted so good," said Millie Tozay. Daniel Hawkins smiled secretly in his heart and said, "There is a lot you haven't eaten." He had thought about giving Millie Tozay a candlelight dinner, steak and red wine, but then he thought about it, it's not like aristocratic girls like them have never had steak and red wine. And he doesn't have very good cooking utensils, so he might as well have sex with her to amaze her even more. Based on her reaction, it seems to be effective. The fragrance spread all around, and the soldiers and the people in the town came out one after another, especially Simon, André and Jacques, who walked up to Daniel Hawkins and asked, "Baron, can you also line up for me?" Rob Hawkins shouted, "What are you doing? Now we are negotiating. Everyone, get out of here." After saying that, he couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "Don't worry, everyone has one, and the townspeople have one too. Line up and come one by one." As soon as this was said, the whole town spread the word from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 100. There were no more, at most 100 people, but they were all boiling, lining up while shouting, "Long live the Baron." Then he said to Millie, "If you don't have enough to eat, tell me, I'll give you enough." Then he said to the soldier behind her who had been staring at the stove eagerly, "You too, but you have to line up." The soldier glanced at Millie, and Millie nodded to him. The soldier followed the line to get the skewers. Daniel Hawkins became the cook for the townspeople and soldiers during the entire negotiation. If there was not enough meat, he would order the soldiers to cut it. And these soldiers who had eaten the skewers were also very happy to help the Baron, cutting and carrying meat back and forth, not complaining about the hard work. Whenever Daniel Hawkins said to them, "Thank you for your hard work," they would say, "Baron, you are the hardest worker." Millie Toss looked at Daniel Hawkins, who was busy grilling meat, and she had a strange feeling in her heart. She couldn't tell the feeling, but she was sure that it was a good feeling. Chapter 135. Starving people to death requires an apology. After only 2 strokes, Millie Toze and her warriors had completely integrated into them. Her warriors threw the accessories aside after eating, and even helped carry the meat box after taking a few sips of wine. Millie Toze thought it was really fun and helped to skewer the meat. Somehow, as long as she stayed next to Hawkins, she would feel at ease and trust him. She later even wondered if Daniel Hawkins had cast some evil spell on her. Everyone ate and drank together for a long time. To add to the fun, the townspeople sang songs one after another. This was a song they composed during this period to praise the Hawkins family. Although his singing skills were average, he was very emotional and his singing voice was passionate. Every town citizen was afraid that he was not the loudest one, so they shouted at the top of their lungs. Millie Toze's tabletop was already covered with bamboo sticks. She didn't know how many skewers she had picked out and how much beer she had drank. After she burped, she covered her mouth in surprise. "Oh my God, I actually burped. Oh, I am a noble girl, so rude." She observed Daniel Hawkins' expression, but Daniel Hawkins didn't seem to pay attention to her. Instead, he raised his beer and shouted at the townspeople below, "Cheers! Cheers!" As the sound gradually decreased, the surrounding gradually became quiet. Millie Toze had eaten so much and drank so much beer that she began to feel sleepy. She gently slapped her face, trying to wake herself up. She was thinking about her mission this time, so she cleared her throat and said to Daniel Hawkins, "Baron, it's getting late, so let's talk first. Let's talk business." When Daniel Hawkins heard that the weather was getting a little cold, he put on his robe and sat back down and poured wine for Millie Toze. Millie Toze put out her hand to block it and said, "I can't drink any more." She thought Daniel Hawkins would persuade her to drink, but he smiled and nodded, took the bottle away from her and gave it to himself pour on. She looked left and right at Daniel Hawkins and said, "Baron, are you drunk?" "It's nothing, it's just that I haven't masturbated for a long time and I miss home." Daniel Hawkins said. "Ah, you want to go back to the slums?" Millie Toze said in surprise, "Wouldn't it be better if that was the case?" Daniel Hawkins shook his head and said, "My home is on another planet." "Ah? Lord Baron, it seems that you really drank too much. How about we talk about it tomorrow?" Millie Toze said. No, Daniel Hawkins thought, "What did I say about that thing, and people couldn't understand, it's okay, you tell me what you want." Seeing the Baron's insistence, Millie Toze cleared her throat and said, "What our Toze family wants to express is that there is a misunderstanding between us and your Hawkins family. We are not occupying your West End. In fact, we are just afraid that you will I don't know the situation here, so I am afraid that this land cannot be managed well. But after observation, you found that I managed the situation very well, and then I prepared to withdraw. I hope I can give you permission when withdrawing from the castle, and promise not to attack you, right?" Daniel Hawkins continued. Faced with Daniel Hawkins' reaction, Millie Toze was completely unexpected. "How do you know?" "It's not difficult to guess. I even guessed your excuse." Daniel Hawkins said, "As for the misunderstanding you mentioned earlier, wait and see whether I can solve it. Do you think it is appropriate for you to say such a thing now? Do you think I'm a fool, or do you think we all are fools?" When Millie Toze heard this, she felt an inexplicable anger. She slapped the table and stood up angrily, "Just say whether you agree or not, or what conditions you want, and I'll give it to you." Daniel Hawkins was surprisingly calm. "Actually, I don't care what you think of me. But what makes me most intolerable is that there are only so many citizens in this town, and you can actually let people starve to death in this town. Human condition. As for you, you are very popular in the castle." Millie Toze disagreed. "Isn't famine like this? If you go to other towns, it's the same, and they're all untouchables." With a bang, Daniel Hawkins punched the table after hearing her words. Militose was completely frightened by his sudden anger. Say it again, what untouchables? They are all you just let them starve to death. Militose still didn't understand why Daniel was so angry, and just said, okay, no more nonsense, what do you want, or I will give you the treasure. Daniel Hawkins waved his hand and said, you are the daughter of Nitose, so you will represent me in this matter. My conditions are very simple. You apologize to all the people in the territory. What did you say? Cried Militose. You want me to apologize to these untouchables? Daniel Hawkins pointed at her and said, as long as I hear the word untouchable from your mouth, this negotiation will officially end, and your soldiers will starve to death in the castle, just like you starved to death my subjects. Militose was trembling all over, and she didn't know if it was because of being too excited. Daniel Hawkins was particularly oppressive to her at this moment. The easygoing and carefree Baron no longer existed. Baron, you can have anything you want. I can give you all my family treasures, as long as you don't ask me to apologize to your subjects. Militose lowered her voice a lot. Her queen-like voice no longer existed. Now her tone was just pleading. Daniel Hawkins waved his hand. Baron, please think carefully. My treasures can allow you to recruit a strong army. Militose thought she could still win back. After all, compared to apologizing, my proposal is the most realistic. Can any army be stronger and bigger than yours now? Daniel Hawkins said sarcastically, yes, money is the most realistic. What if I don't lack money? Facing Daniel Hawkins' aggressive tone, Militose did not feel disgusted, but scared. She knew that there was no other way except to apologize. Then Daniel Hawkins activated the echo spell, which he specially expanded so that everyone in the castle could hear it, and then shouted to the people below the slope, all the people, come here. The Tosser family has something to say to you. When the people heard this, they all gathered around the Baron. Daniel Hawkins looked at Militose and made a please gesture. Chapter 136. Save a life. It was obviously only a few steps away, but Militose walked extremely hard. If she apologized, she could say that she no longer had to mix in the aristocratic circle. Since ancient times, no nobles have ever apologized to common people, let alone untouchables. Seeing that she couldn't speak for a long time, Daniel Hawkins said next to her, I'll give you 5 seconds. Before Militose could fully react, Daniel Hawkins started counting down. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. To all the people of Hawkins below, the Tose family apologizes to you. It was we who made you hungry in the famine, and your relatives also starved to death. I'm sorry. We will leave the West District and return to the North District in the future. We also hope that the Hawkins family keeps its promise. Militose shed tears as she said this, and after a while, she squatted on the ground and cried. The people down the slope thought they heard it wrong at first. How could the noble apologize to us? But after hearing the story later and seeing Militose crying, they finally believed that it was real and that they were not dreaming. God, this has never happened in thousands of years. Just when they were still amazed, they heard the Baron standing up and saying to them, I, Daniel Hawkins, as your lord, from now on, I promise you that I will definitely protect you, and no one will starve to death. As long as you follow me, obey my words, and implement my laws, I will definitely lead you to prosperity. Okay. Long live the Baron. The townspeople in the audience burst into applause, and even the warriors and soldiers had tears in their eyes. Simon, André, and Jacques all couldn't help but said, sure enough, this big brother is right. For Militose, she will always remember this unforgettable day. As a noble, a eldest lady, and an honorary student of Seraphia Wizarding Academy, after tonight, all her arrogance has been wiped out by Daniel. Hawkins was wasted, and now only a helpless little girl was left. Nitose also heard his daughter's apology in the castle, and the whole room was smashed to pieces by him. It's too much to bully someone, it's simply too much to bully someone. He could even imagine that the soldiers were probably laughing at him. In this case, where could he save his face? Daniel Hawkins, I will cut you into pieces. At dawn the next day, Sonk Town was very quiet. Everyone drank too much last night and was sleeping. Nitose took advantage of this opportunity and quickly opened the castle door. The soldiers came out of the castle one after another in an orderly manner. Militose was riding her horse with red and swollen eyes. As soon as she came out, she heard Daniel Hawkins shouting to them. "Good morning, there's no need to leave in such a hurry." Daniel Hawkins's call frightened Millie Tosay, and even the Tosay Knight was startled. "Ah, Lord Baron, you are so early." When Knight Tosay saw Daniel Hawkins, he was not the knight who wanted to kill him last night, but he greeted him calmly. "Isn't this a gift for you?" Daniel Hawkins actually didn't sleep all night, and he knew that the other party would be dispatched either that night or early in the morning. Daniel Hawkins looked at Millie Tosay and said, "I hope you have a safe journey. After you go to the North District, if you have any problems or need help in the future, remember to tell me. We hope we can be good neighbors in the future." Millie Tosay looked very unhappy, her eyes were red and swollen, and Daniel Hawkins forced her to apologize last night, so she turned away expressionlessly. Daniel Hawkins said, "Millie, you are still angry, you need to improve your ideological awareness." "Yes, Lord Baron is right. Your love for the people made me reflect all night long. After I return to the North District, I will definitely learn from you and be a good lord." Knight Tosay said, "If I have the chance, I want to talk to you again, but it's a pity that it's not convenient for me to get off my horse now. When the North District is sorted out, I'll invite you to be my guest." "I thank you in advance," Daniel Hawkins said. "By the way, are you the only one?" Knight Tosay asked. "They all drank too much last night and were all resting." Daniel Hawkins pointed to the soldiers on the roadside, "However, I still let some of the better drinkers guard first." "I'm not guarding you. Don't misunderstanding, but to guard against monsters in the forest." Knight Tosay nodded, "That's good, protect your people." With that, they formally said goodbye. As their troops withdrew from the castle, Rob Hawkins came out from behind a house. "Lord Baron, we can." "Hold on," said Daniel Hawkins. "Let the bullets fly." "Bullet? Oh, let the arrow fly a little longer." Rob Hawkins nodded thoughtfully, "So how long will the flight take?" "At least let them make the first move." As commanded. When Knight Tosay saw that all his men and horses had come out and were some distance away from the town in the West District, he suddenly ordered, "Stop, turn back now, and fight back." Millie Tosay was startled and shouted quickly, "Father, what are you doing?" "Daughter, now is a good time to fight back. They are all drunk and have no defense. I know that your apology last night was forced by Daniel, right?" Knight Toss shouted, "This plan came up when you told me not to give the treasure to Count Rossi and advised us to return to the North District. It is impossible to return to the North District. Your apology last night brought shame to our family. Daughter, I don't blame you. It must be Daniel Hawkins who forced you to do this. But if we just go back to the North District, even if we drive away the Shadow Throat Beast, our nobles will no longer be able to gain a foothold in this country. We can only stay in the North District, a place where no one lays eggs, forever." Millie Toss hurriedly stopped him, "Father, you can't do this. This is equivalent to breaking our promise, and we will have no way to survive in the future. Our honor is truly gone, and we will be despised by the world. In the face of victory, promises and honor are nothing. My daughter, the so-called honor rules you learned in the academy and the so-called promise virtues you saw in the books are nothing in reality." Knight Toss said, "As long as there is victory, we have everything, including virtue. We must take advantage of their unpreparedness and kill them back. If we wait for Daniel and his men to enter the castle, it will be too late. All soldiers, charge, take back our territory, take back our home." Knight Toss roared. "Charge!" No matter how Millie Toss shouted, it was useless. It was really difficult. In this case, what should she do? Should she attack Daniel Hawkins with her father? No matter how talented Daniel Hawkins was, he couldn't resist so many people, and they also had wizards. If all the wizards united, plus these warriors, Daniel Hawkins would probably be in trouble. She decided that at least she could save Daniel Hawkins' life. Chapter 137. There is an enemy. There is an enemy. After the soldiers guarding outside Sonk Town blew the alarm, they began to return to defense. After a while, under the arrangement of the soldiers, a small army was quickly formed. Other soldiers with the weakest combat power arranged for the townspeople to hide in the castle. Daniel Hawkins smiled at the citizens, "The castle has been vacated, you go and take a look first." The people were flattered, but in the face of a powerful enemy, they didn't seem to be very afraid. They just heard them say, "Lord, give me a weapon, and I will serve you." Yet, fuck him. I've long disliked Naitose. Daniel Hawkins looked at their skinny but enthusiastic faces and said with a smile, please take good care of the castle for me. Guard the gate and don't let the enemy in. As you command. Naitose looked at Daniel Hawkins sitting alone at the gate of the town, crossing his legs and drinking something dark and unknown. After taking a sip, Daniel Hawkins said with enjoyment, ah, Sonk Forest is really good. Seeing Daniel Hawkins' carefree look, Millie Tose had a bad feeling in her heart. She said to her father, Father, we'd better withdraw. I feel like he has a backup plan. Naitose said, he is just bluffing us. His soldiers feasted and drank all night, and their current combat strength must have been weakened. His current backup force is the army hidden behind the house. Even if he attacks us with all his strength, we are not afraid, we have many people. At this time, Daniel Hawkins said to them, hey, why don't you leave? I advise you, if you want to leave, leave quickly, otherwise you will have no chance. Daniel, you brat, you're a boy in your early 20s, you don't know anything, you just want to be a lord, what a joke. Naitose started his battle roar and shouted, get them all. Come on. Daniel Hawkins' eyes suddenly became sharp, he opened the shield and shouted, up. Rob Hawkins, who was hiding behind the house, rushed out with a small team and shouted, kill them all. Naitose looked at Daniel Hawkins' fighting team. There were only about 30 people. These 30 soldiers plus one warrior wanted to compete with my 500 people. What a joke. Thinking of this, he laughed and said. Daniel, you only have 30 people available now, are the others drunk? Faced with the provocation, Daniel Hawkins ignored him and just started casting spells behind the army. After a while, the blizzard began to blow. Upon seeing this, Millie Tose quickly united with the other 5 wizards and began to fight Daniel Hawkins. I have to say that with the support of Millie Tose, Daniel Hawkins did have a bit of a hard time. The 2 soldiers were responsible for fighting the blizzard together, while Millie and 3 other soldiers put shields on their own soldiers, and they were responsible for repairing whoever's shield was broken. This also made Daniel Hawkins discover that the shield magic identification stone would not reject it. No matter how powerful Daniel Hawkins is, he can't defeat so many hands with one punch, and it seems that his own soldiers are almost unable to hold up in the enemy's blizzard. In addition, the enemy's equipment is well equipped, and they will definitely not be able to hold on if this continues. So in order to protect his soldiers, Daniel Hawkins stopped blowing snowstorms. Instead, he turned on the water element and put shields on his soldiers one by one according to priority. Naitose saw this and couldn't help but smile. Millie, did you see that he turned to the defensive? Even so, Millie Tose still felt something was strange. With Daniel Hawkins' shield, these 30 men seemed to be invincible. After such a long stalemate, not only did his side not lose strength, but he also killed 30 soldiers from the other side. Naitose couldn't help but sigh in his heart, he was really strong. However, he did not panic. He had never thought that he could be evenly matched with Daniel Hawkins one-on-one. He relied on the number of people. Sure enough, although Daniel Hawkins and his water element will shield his warriors, they can't bear to keep shielding, and the water element itself also absorbs magic from Daniel, and casting spells requires not only magic power in addition, it also requires physical strength. He felt that he was starting to breathe heavily. At this time, he did not dare to drink the potion. The side effects were secondary. The main reason was that he was afraid that if he stopped drinking the potion, his soldiers would be sacrificed because of his inattention. He didn't want to see one of his own die if he could help it. He looked at his numerical value, and the part of the blue bar began to decrease with his physical strength, and was being consumed at an accelerated rate. He also felt that his breath was beginning to become chaotic. Moreover, although the soldiers have shields set by Daniel Hawkins, their physical strength is also being depleted. This is something that Daniel Hawkins has no way to do. His aura was messy, and Millie Tose's side was similar. Although there were many of them, compared with Daniel Hawkins, they were all scumbags. If they hadn't joined forces, they would have been defeated by Daniel Hawkins long ago. Millie Tose also discovered something. If Daniel Hawkins did not take care of his soldiers and go to the ice ring with his water element at full speed to blow the blizzard, at least a quarter of her soldiers would be killed or injured. More than one. It's equivalent to saying that Daniel Hawkins can kill 100 people by himself. One person is worth 100 people, Naitose also sighed, it would be great if he was mine. Since he can't be used by me, let's take this opportunity to kill him. Millie Tose was really heartbroken. Not only did she have to fight against the genius, but she also had to find a way to keep the genius. It was really difficult. Knight Tose said, "Give me the second group of people." Seeing that the 30 soldiers of Daniel Hawkins were exhausted, Knight Tose arranged for a second wave of people to go up. The soldiers of the Hawkins family felt that the swords in their hands were getting heavier and heavier. Some shield soldiers could not even attack anymore and could only passively defend and use their last strength to slash at them. The weapons of the second army of the Tose Knights were more sophisticated and enchanted with magic. With a wave of their swords, the shields of the Hawkins soldiers were immediately broken. After their shields were broken, the freezing effect was negligible to the armor magic resistance of the second batch of troops. When Daniel Hawkins saw this, he couldn't help laughing loudly and said, "Hey, Knight Tose, it seems you have made a heavy investment." Knight Tose laughed loudly, kill them all for me." Millie Tose felt that it was already this time, and Daniel Hawkins had obviously begun to gasp for breath, but he still seemed to be able to do it with ease. Could it be that he was really just pretending? Until she saw the other soldier carrying 4 magic identification stones, she quickly shouted, "Father, it's not good." Chapter 138. I have never asked anyone for help in my life. Faced with his daughter's warning, Knight Tose didn't care at all. He was very excited when he saw that the enemy's physical strength and magic power were almost exhausted. Even if Daniel Hawkins still had a backup plan, Knight Tose was not afraid at all, because the most difficult Baron was about to be dealt with, so the others were just rotten fish and shrimp. He knew that his daughter was worried that Daniel Hawkins had 3 wizards, but those 3 wizards were all from the Dawn Wizard Academy. The 3 of them together were not as good as his daughter Millie's little finger. It seems that in the end, the victory still belongs to him. Knight Tose thought of this, and when he saw Daniel Hawkins' magic power weakened and the shield was vague, he raised his great sword and rushed towards Daniel Hawkins. In order to deal with Daniel, his great sword was specially enchanted with the ice-breaking effect, and his armor was also spent a lot of money to not only enhance the general magic resistance, but also specially engage in ice magic resistance. This money is really worth it, just to chop off Daniel Hawkins' head, wash away all the humiliation, and restore his noble honor. This time, he will definitely become a Viscount. Daniel Hawkins, if you are a man, take my sword. Knight Tose shouted, and then swung his sword at Daniel Hawkins. Daniel Hawkins froze Knight Tose's horse with an ice ring, and then flashed away. Knight Tose immediately jumped off the horse, started fighting roar, and rushed to Daniel Hawkins. Daniel Hawkins' eyes widened, and he had to take care of the soldiers and himself, so he opened his clone and let Knight Tose cut twice. "If you have the guts, don't use protective magic," Knight Tose said. Daniel Hawkins said, "Damn it, what are you talking about? If you have the guts, don't sneak attack. I let you go, but you don't leave. You're waiting to die. The one who died is..." At this moment, another wave of shouting and killing came from not far away. Then, another wave of Daniel Hawkins' men rushed over and joined the battlefield. When Daniel Hawkins heard this, he laughed and said, "You will regret why you turned back." Knight Tose laughed, "It's all a mob. I will kill as many of you as you come." After that, he slashed at Daniel Hawkins for the 3rd time. At this moment, an ice arrow hit Knight Tose, and Knight Tose laughed, "Ha ha ha, this power is just a tickle." Daniel Hawkins laughed, "What if there are 6 ice arrows?" "What?" Knight Tose was stunned. He looked over according to Daniel Hawkins' instructions, and saw 3 wizards Simon, André, and Jacques, including their water elements, rubbing ice arrows together. Demetri Tose and Millie Tose were stunned. How could it be possible? How could students of Dawn Wizard Academy have water elements? The thesis on this magic has not been published yet. Even if Daniel Hawkins taught them, it would be impossible for them to learn it in such a short time. "Father, be careful!" Millie Tose shouted. She was about to put a shield on her father, but was interrupted by an ice cone from Daniel Hawkins. "You!" Millie Tose looked at Daniel Hawkins in surprise. Daniel Hawkins spread his hands, saying that he still had a clone anyway, and the help had arrived. The first wave of soldiers were gradually withdrawing, and the enemy wizard's magic was also consumed by Daniel Hawkins in the previous battle. Therefore, Daniel Hawkins is now relatively relaxed. Millie Tose didn't have time to be surprised, and hurriedly shouted, "Hurry up and put a layer of shield on the Lord." Those soldiers were slashing at the wizard, and they didn't have time to put a shield on themselves, so how could they care about Night Toss? Night Toss was already stunned in place, neither slashing nor running away. His mind seemed to be dull, but running away was useless. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "Night Tosser, I wonder if your armor can withstand it." After saying that, 6 ice arrows flew past Daniel Hawkins and hit Night Tosser in front of him. A crisp sound rang out, and Night Tosser was completely frozen. Then 6 ice cones followed passively. The ice and armor on the frozen Night Tosser were all broken. Night Tosser vomited blood and knelt down. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "Look, another kneeling tribe." The wizards at the scene had seen Daniel Hawkins' game and couldn't help laughing. The soldiers saw that their lords had knelt down. They didn't want to fight at first, but now it was even better. Just surrender. The wizards were about to cast a teleportation spell, but they were all interrupted by Simon, André, and Jacques. The enemy wizards had already been exhausted, and now they were no match for the 3 of them, not to mention that they had water elements. They killed all the wizards except Millie Tosser in a few seconds. Daniel Hawkins walked up to Night Tosser, stepped on his shoulder, and kicked him hard. Night Tosser lay on the ground and looked at him blankly. "Kneeling tribe, hee." Daniel Hawkins said, "Why did you come back? Where did you hide the soldiers?" Night Tosser asked. "Songke Forest." Daniel Hawkins said. "Ha ha ha, you are worthy of it." Night Tosser laughed, "I didn't expect that I lost to you." Daniel Hawkins shook his head and said, "You lost to the people." Night Tosse's eyes widened, he became agitated, coughed repeatedly, and coughed up blood. "Stop talking nonsense, kill me." The soldiers all shouted, "Kill him! Kill him!" Just when Daniel Hawkins was about to take action, Millie Tosse appeared in front of his father and said, "Please, Lord Baron, please. Don't kill my father. We can go far. Those who are far away will never appear in front of you, let alone in your territory." Daniel Hawkins looked at Millie Tosse expressionlessly. At this moment, she no longer had any aristocratic temperament, she was just a daughter who was begging her father frantically. "We still have treasures, which we will give to you. We don't want anything anymore. I just ask you to spare my father's life." Millie Tosse cried. Daniel Hawkins closed his eyes. Oops, he was so hesitant, and he didn't sleep all night. He only felt a headache. He pinched his forehead with one hand. "Millie, we don't plead, death is not scary, Daniel Hawkins, I advise you to kill me now, otherwise, I will come back sooner or later." Night Tosse shouted, "As long as I live, I will kill you. I won't let you go." "Father, stop talking, please, stop talking." It was so difficult for Millie Tosse. She had never asked for help from anyone in her entire life, and now she was asking for both Daniel Hawkins and her father. Chapter 139. I have done nothing. Daniel Hawkins rubbed his temples. To be honest, if Millie Tosser wasn't around, it would be much easier to kill Night Tosser on the spot. Whether it was the original owner or his own subconscious, he was still a little uncomfortable with killing his father in front of his daughter. The current scene was that Night Tosser was begging for death and saying all kinds of ugly words. Millie Tosser was begging her father not to die, saying all kinds of nice words, even willing to become the indescribable captive of Baron Hawkins. "Come on, kill me, quickly. You coward, if you don't kill me, I will definitely kill you in the future. I will start with your relatives, starting with your mother." "Father, please, stop talking. Baron, please. Enough." Daniel Hawkins shouted, "Dimitri, you want to die on the battlefield, so that at least you can be considered a noble honor, right? Haha, I won't let you succeed." When Millie Toss heard this, she felt hopeful and smiled, "Baron, you won't kill my father, right?" "Thank you, Baron, we will keep our promise and never come back." Dimitri Toss was stunned. He didn't expect that he could save his life even though he cursed so harshly and so badly. To be honest, he didn't want to die. If he really had to die, dying in battle would be a decent life. Just when he thought he had escaped, Daniel Hawkins sneered, "No, no, no, I just want to say that I will not give you the honor of dying in battle. As for your life, whether I kill you or not is up to the townspeople." Dimitri and Millie were stunned. What does this mean? Daniel Hawkins continued, "I will hold a voting meeting. As long as the townspeople of Songke town want you to die, Dimitri, if more than half of the townspeople want you to die, I can only prepare the guillotine for you. Then he said to Simon and Rob Hawkins, "Imprison this witch and warrior." When Rob Hawkins heard this, he immediately stepped forward and locked Demetri Toss in shackles. And because Millie Toss was a witch, Simon used the wizard shackles used exclusively by wizards. Needless to say, they were also produced by the Wizard Association. Only legal lords could buy them. Otherwise, they could only buy them on the black market at 10 times the price. However, although Daniel Hawkins bought it at the original price in the Wizard Association, the price was really high. Guillotine. Demetri Toss said with a mixture of fear and anger, "No, no, how can you let those low-class people decide my life and death? God, Daniel, you are also a nobleman, and there has been no such practice since ancient times." Millie Toss was still thinking about this matter. After listening to her father's words, she reacted and said quickly, "Yes, Baron, if you do this, you will also be criticized by the world, and your reputation will be greatly damaged, and the Wizard Association, the Church, the Academy, and the aristocratic circle will." Before she finished speaking, Daniel Hawkins said disdainfully, "I don't care." Daniel Hawkins specially built a platform in a large open space in the center of the town for this trial meeting, and the guillotine was next to the platform. There were about 50 townspeople standing sparsely under the platform, and the rest of the soldiers and prisoners stood in groups in the east and west. Simon, André, and Jacques guarded all the wizard captives, including Millie Tosser. As Demetri Tosser was escorted up by Robert Hawkins, the townspeople cheered and shouted, "Hawkins! Hawkins! Hawkins!" Millie Tosser had a glimmer of hope for this trial, because she didn't think that this group of untouchables would really dare to vote to execute a noble, but now when she saw this group of untouchables cheering and shouting at Daniel Hawkins, her little hope was gone. Demetri Tosser looked at the untouchables in the audience, and a sense of humiliation arose spontaneously. Now facing this situation, for such a small chance of survival, he handed his life to this group of untouchables. In fact, from this moment on, his Tosser family can be said to have become a shame in the history of the nobility, and the most shameful one. Because the Tosser family was the first to be judged by the untouchables. Similarly, the Hawkins family will also be affected. As for whether it is good or bad, we can only wait for the passage of time. Daniel Hawkins stretched out his hands, and everyone immediately quieted down. Then he began to give a speech. He didn't like speeches, but he felt that this speech was still necessary. The most important thing was that he had to declare that the Tosser family had occupied his territory, and he had taken back the territory, proving that he was not an aggressor, but a righteous army. Then he told the people about whether to execute Knight Tosser. After hearing this, the people were all surprised. Everyone looked at each other. They never thought that they could decide the life and death of a noble. Looking at the puzzled look of everyone, Daniel Hawkins said, "As your lord, I will take good care of you and protect you. As long as I give you enough time, I can even lead you to wealth. Therefore, there is no need to be afraid of your vote. Just vote from the bottom of your heart and express your true thoughts through voting." As soon as Daniel Hawkins finished speaking, there was applause from the audience. They had been getting along with Daniel Hawkins for a while, and they believed in their new lord very much. Apart from anything else, this lord pulled them back from the situation where they were about to starve to death. Not only did they eat bread, but they could also eat meat occasionally. Look, they had a barbecue a few days ago. If it weren't for Baron Hawkins, they would have starved to death long ago. Because of this, they had a strong contrast between the two lords before and after, so they hated Knight Toss. At this time, Daniel Hawkins said to Knight Toss, who was kneeling on one side, "Do you have anything to say to the townspeople? I'll give you a chance to see if you can get some votes back." "Wow, it's killing people and hurting their hearts." Knight Toss looked at Daniel Hawkins with gritted teeth. If he didn't say anything, his life was in the hands of the townspeople. Did he just give up? If he said something, what could he say? He tried hard to think of words that would benefit him. He thought for a long time and didn't know what to say. Daniel Hawkins saw what he was thinking and said to everyone directly, "I swear in the name of the ancient gods, as long as you can tell me something that will benefit the townspeople now, I will pardon you immediately." Everyone was in an uproar. Millie Tosser felt that she saw hope, and Knight Tosser racked his brains to think. Time passed by minute, and Knight Tosser could not say a word, because he had not done anything to benefit the townspeople. Chapter 140, Maintaining the Body. Execute him! Execute him! Execute him! Seeing that Knight Tosser couldn't say anything, the townspeople became even more angry. They didn't even bother to vote, and directly shouted the word "execute him" in the audience. Millie Tozay watched expressionlessly as her father was dragged to the guillotine step by step and knelt down. When her father's neck was stuck, the two of them looked at each other. Night Tozay looked at Millie Tozay. He wanted to tell his daughter to turn her head away, but he couldn't scream anyway. There was an inexplicable power that made him speechless. It seemed to be humiliation, or perhaps it's fear. Yes, that's right, it's fear. When Night Tozay's neck was placed on the guillotine, he felt his legs were weak and his heartbeat was racing. It was strange. He was not afraid of death on the battlefield, but why was he so afraid when he came to the guillotine? Die. The fear of death grew stronger and stronger in Night Tozay's heart, and before he knew it, no matter how loud the shouts of the townspeople in the audience were, he could no longer hear any sound. He saw Daniel Hawkins speaking to the townspeople, and he knew that the moment the Baron finished his speech, he would die. Thinking of this, he couldn't help shouting, "Lord Baron, please, please spare your life." As soon as these words came out, everyone was in an uproar. Even Daniel Hawkins was stunned for a moment. As for the former subordinates of Night Tozay, they were even more surprised. No way, no way, Night Tozay actually begged for mercy, was actually scared to death, and what the hell, actually cried? Daniel Hawkins looked at the embarrassed expression of Night Tozay, and then at the expressionless expression of Millie Tozay. He couldn't help but smile, and just said, "Why did I do it in the first place if I had known today?" After saying that, he gave an order, the knife fell, and with a swish sound, a head rolled down. When everyone saw this, they cheered and kept calling the name of the Hawkins family. Daniel Hawkins was always paying attention to Millie Tozay. He had actually already said hello to Simon and took special care of her. Fortunately, except for her expressionless face and white lips, Millie Tozay didn't have any overreaction, nor did she faint on the spot. In fact, no matter what Millie Tozay's reaction is, Daniel Hawkins can understand it. After all, no matter how damn her father deserves to die, he is still his biological father. As a biological daughter, seeing his father's head being chopped off will definitely not be easy. At this time, because the table was not stable enough, Night Tozay's head rolled down from the table to the bottom. When the townspeople saw Night Tozay's head rolling down in front of them, their first reaction was to retreat. They looked at Night Tozay's unblinking eyes, and they were a little scared at first, but at this moment, a town citizen rushed in front of everyone, picked up Night Tozay's head, and put the face of the head on his face. He looked at each other and said mockingly, "Ha ha ha, you never imagined that you would also have this day." After saying this, the town citizen kicked the head into the crowd. One person booed and everyone was happy. Before Daniel Hawkins could speak, the people in the audience were in chaos and kicked Dmitry Tozay's head like a ball. Millie Tozay looked at this scene with an expressionless face. Daniel Hawkins reactivated the echo technique and said sternly, "Which one of you is kicking? If you don't stop, everyone will be whipped 20 times. As soon as these words came out, the townspeople stopped. The man who took the lead just now said, "My Lord Baron, he is a heinous person." Daniel Hawkins said, "The heinous person has now served his sentence, and his crimes have been repaid. It is your turn to be insulted." All the townspeople lowered their heads and stopped talking. Finally, Daniel Hawkins arranged for all the townspeople who had just played football to be responsible for digging graves, especially the one who had just taken the lead in football. He was responsible for Dmitry Tozay's grave, and the rest were responsible for disposing of the bodies of the dead. Faced with Daniel Hawkins' anger, no one in the townspeople dared to refute, and at the same time, they also agreed with the Baron's approach from the bottom of their hearts. As they dug the grave, they respected Daniel Hawkins even more. Millie Tozay was brought into a room with wizard shackles. Her head was dazed. Although she followed Simon all the way, her soul seemed to have disappeared. She was speechless all the way. She would go wherever Simon asked her to go. Where to go? She only knew that she was taken to a room. After she came to her senses, after a long time, she found that she was in her original room. This surprised her as she had expected to be in a cellar cell. At this moment, she heard someone knocking on the door, and she said subconsciously, "Please come in." As soon as she said that, she felt very inappropriate. Millie, you have to remember that this castle is no longer it's yours." The door creaked open, and to her surprise, it was Daniel Hawkins who came in, bringing delicious food and beer. "Lord Baron." Millie Tozay stood up and bowed awkwardly to Daniel Hawkins due to the effect of the shackles. Daniel Hawkins's attitude towards her was quite surprising. Thinking about this resolute royal sister, when facing her father-killing enemy, she should not only glare with anger, but also gnashed her teeth. No matter how cold and mocking, insulting, she would have to let him put it together. Before he came to see Millie Tosser, he was even prepared to be beaten and insulted by her, but in this situation, he didn't know what to say. They looked at each other for a long time, and Daniel Hawkins said, "You haven't eaten for a day, you must be hungry, come and eat something." The fragrant food did wake up her empty stomach, and she was indeed hungry, but she just stared at the plate and didn't move her mouth. Daniel Hawkins knew that she wanted to be decent, or she was afraid that he would poison her, so he started to eat first, and continued to invite, "Come, I order you to have a meal with me." After hearing this, Millie Tosser started to eat. It must be said that this time it was not skewers, but mashed potatoes and steaks, and with sweet red wine. It must be said that it was really delicious. Millie Tosser didn't care about her image when she ate later, and coupled with the large consumption of magic power on the battlefield, she was really hungry to the extreme. Daniel Hawkins quietly watched her eating. If he were Danny in the past, he would definitely laugh at her, but today he had no interest at all. After eating, Daniel Hawkins said, "Millie, do you hate me?" Millie Tosser was stunned for a while when asked this, but she finally shook her head and said, "No. On the contrary, Baron, I thank you for protecting my father's body in front of the townspeople in the end." Chapter 141. Millie now feels that she has nothing to lose anyway. If the Baron Hawkins in front of her still refuses to let go of her anger, he will probably kill her too. Her current mentality was that she was neither afraid of death nor knew the meaning of living, so under the guidance of the Baron, she spoke out all her innermost thoughts. Daniel Hawkins also learned from this that she was the first to persuade Dimitri Tozay to return to the North District, and it was she who persuaded him not to attack and kill him midway. At this point, Millie couldn't help but shed tears. "Why doesn't father listen to me?" Daniel Hawkins did nothing but watched her cover her face in tears quietly. Through his observation, he was sure that Millie was not sad because she had lost her aristocratic status, but because she simply lost her father. After this meal, Daniel Hawkins had his answer. As for the trials of wizard prisoners and warrior prisoners being held in the castle hall, Daniel Hawkins believed that there was no need to do it in public like the trial of the Tozay Knights. And he had his own ideas about such prisoners. As for the ordinary soldier prisoners, they were arranged to dig graves and dispose of the corpses. The wizards and warrior captives stood on one side and looked at Daniel Hawkins sitting on the Lord's seat. Faced with this situation, they all have very different feelings. Before, the person sitting in the position of Lord was Dimitri Tozay, but now it is another master, and they themselves are also shackled. Became a prisoner. Daniel Hawkins was the first to speak. He first scolded them angrily, accusing them of helping others to do evil, not caring about the people, and even allowing his subordinates to violate the bodies and chastity of the people. He directly told the story about the tavern. The prisoners in the audience, especially Millie, looked at Daniel Hawkins in surprise. How did he know this? Daniel Hawkins did not say he was Danny, but said he learned about it through the tavern owner. Only then did everyone show their true expressions. However, Millie's expression was more expectant. She wondered if the Lord had seen Danny. If so, she really wanted to ask where Danny had gone. They watched Baron Hawkins become more and more angry as he spoke, and couldn't help but lower their heads. They didn't pray and repent, thinking that they were really wrong, but felt that their lives seemed to be decided here. However, Daniel Hawkins changed his tone and said, "Of course, just like Dimitri Tozay, I will give you the opportunity to defend yourself." As soon as these words came out, everyone raised their heads, feeling that they all had hope. The whole hall suddenly became noisy, and they all rushed to defend themselves. Daniel Hawkins gave his father Rob a look, and Rob stood up and shouted, "Shut up and tell me one by one." Then he pointed at one of the soldiers and said, "You speak first." I killed the fewest people on the battlefield." At this time, the fellow prisoner next to him quickly retorted, "Nonsense, the Baron didn't sacrifice a single soldier in this battle. You either killed the least, or you didn't kill anyone at all." Yes, it all depends on the wise and mighty leadership of Lord Baron," another captured soldier said. Daniel Hawkins sneered, "Humph, flattering can't save your lives. I advise you to talk about something else within the limited time." "Lord Baron, the men I led have never bullied the townspeople. At this time, a prisoner stood up and said. Daniel Hawkins nodded, you all should learn from this. This kind of excuse is useful. However, it is best that what you say is true. If I later find out that it is false, I will make your life worse than death. When all the prisoners heard that there was such an operation, they all started to think about it. Unfortunately, most of their subordinates had done things to bully the townspeople, so someone said, Lord, I have never bullied the townspeople myself. I don't know if this is okay. Daniel Hawkins nodded and said, okay. Wow, a second person has been pardoned, and the rest of the people are thinking. However, it is useless to think about it, because for most people, bullying the townspeople is their daily entertainment. Since they can't avoid death, they might as well drag their companions into the water, so they said, Lord, he doesn't have any subordinates, so of course he can't bully the townspeople. Yes, yes, Lord Baron is aware of it. As for him saying that he has never bullied the townspeople, he is the Tozay cavalry, Dmitry Tozay's new recruit, who just joined us, and he hasn't even had time to bully him yet. The townspeople are starting to fight. It's not fair. Yes, it's unfair. Lord Baron, I think we need to re-establish pardon standards. Yeah, that makes sense. And those wizards have no soldiers or subordinates to begin with. They have a huge advantage. You can't pardon them just because they are wizards. Daniel Hawkins looked at these prisoners and couldn't help but cover his forehead, even though he had seen their characteristics when he was Danny's second and fifth son. But now he looked at them again and felt even more speechless. What kind of people did Dmitry Tozay recruit? They were just a group of rogues who were not united and fought with each other openly and secretly. When the warrior captives said this, the wizard captives began to give up their self-defense, and instead began to curse each other at the warrior captives. Be quiet! Rob Hawkins roared, holding one hand on the hilt of the sword, as if he was about to pull out his crusher and chop off their heads at any time. After everyone quieted down, Daniel Hawkins said, Millie, do you have anything to say? Millie Toss ate something, and after a night's rest, she was in much better spirits today. She had wondered why Daniel Hawkins gave her a sumptuous meal last night and left without saying anything in the end. She thought that this might be the Baron's preferential treatment of women, giving her a delicious last meal at the end of her life. She was still very grateful for this. This time she did not beg for mercy or make any excuses. She stepped forward and saluted Daniel Hawkins very solemnly, saying, Baron, I have nothing to say, I am willing to be executed. Her generous demeanor, compared with the group of selfish captives who were greedy for life and afraid of death, shocked everyone present. Daniel Hawkins saw this and smiled at the other captive warriors and wizards. Compared to Millie, you are really manly. There are so many men in the room, but you are all acting like girls. Simon, remove Millie's shackles. Everyone widened their eyes and looked at Millie Tosser. She was the daughter of the previous lord. No matter who was pardoned, she could not be pardoned. Chapter 142. Contract. Everyone tried to persuade Daniel Hawkins not to pardon Millie Tozay, but when Daniel Hawkins asked them to give their reasons, they couldn't explain why. They argued for a long time, and the reason why she could not be pardoned was that she was the daughter of the Knight of Tozay. The prisoners were even more dissatisfied, and they all shouted, Lord, you can't pardon her just because she is beautiful. She is very wild and difficult to control. We used to be her subordinates and know her very well. Temper. Daniel Hawkins was really irritated by their remarks and scolded directly, at least the Tozay family is also your former master. As far as I know, the Tozay family treats you well. How good it is now. Each one of you bite back and insults your former lord. As long as there is one of you who defends Millie, I will forgive you. When the prisoners heard this, they felt confused and couldn't figure out what the lord was thinking. However, no matter what, they couldn't let it go as long as they had the slightest chance of survival, so they started to speak well of the former lord again. Millie was even more confused. She knew very well that Daniel Hawkins didn't want her beauty or body. What did he want to do? Daniel Hawkins explained the reason for pardoning Millie Tozay. Regardless of whether he was convinced or not, at least the fact that Millie persuaded the Tozay Knights to surrender and abandon the West District to the North District and try to prevent her father from sneak attacks was enough for them. Shut up! I saw Daniel Hawkins waving to the soldier guarding the side. The soldier nodded and went out through the side door. After a while, the soldier came back carrying a box. When he opened the box, everyone poked their heads to see what it was. The soldier took out a roll of paper from the box and unfolded it. It was a portrait of Daniel Hawkins. Everyone was in an uproar, and Millie's face turned red when she saw it. Daniel Hawkins pretended not to know and asked deliberately, "Millie, according to my investigation, you painted this?" Millie didn't dare to look at him, just stared at the ground and nodded. Looking at her expression, Daniel Hawkins just felt funny, so he asked again, "Why did you draw me? Do you want to arrest me?" When Millie heard this, she looked at Daniel Hawkins with wide eyes and said, "No, that's not the case. I have always admired you since I won the national championship, so I have been painting your portrait since I came back." "Not good, please forgive me." Everyone laughed except the prisoners. Daniel Hawkins asked, "Simon, what do you think of the painting?" Simon said, "I think it's pretty good." Daniel Hawkins looked at André and Jacques respectively, and they both said, "Me too." He smiled and looked at his father, Rob, who said, "I don't understand art." Daniel Hawkins laughed loudly and said, "Millie, it seems I have another reason to pardon you. Which of you is dissatisfied?" No one was dissatisfied, even the captives were envious and said, "If I had known I would have learned to paint, it would have saved lives at critical moments." After Simon heard this, he willingly released Millie from the wizard's shackles. To be honest, Simon was still a little worried when he unlocked her shackles. After all, even if he was together with Andrea and Jacques, he was no match for Millie. As for the remaining warriors and wizard prisoners, Daniel Hawkins felt that they were really disgusting and could not be kept for his own use. If they were released, according to their rogue character and their abilities, they would only cause harm. One party ordered them all to be executed on the spot. Before they had time to beg for mercy, Rob Hawkins shouted, and his warriors stepped forward, drew their swords and pierced their backs. The trial is over. Millie felt uncomfortable without the shackles. After watching the corpses being cleared away, she couldn't help but ask, "Lord Baron, am I free now?" Daniel Hawkins nodded, "Yes, and if you are not convinced in the future and think that I killed your father and caused you to lose your status as a noble, you can come to me for revenge at any time. Of course, I hope don't let that day come." Millie took a breath of surprise and said quickly, No, how is it possible? I will never do this." She looked at Daniel Hawkins in front of her, and it was strange. He was obviously younger than her. But the way he spoke and his aura had an indescribable pressure. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "That's good, but I would like to ask, what are your plans next?" Faced with this question, Millie didn't know how to answer. After a long time, she said, "Back to Lord Baron, I don't know where to go. I don't have a home anymore, and I don't have any money. Maybe I can go to the Wizards Association. Or go back to my academy and try your luck." Daniel Hawkins said, "I have a proposal, I wonder if you can accept it." "Ah, Lord Baron, as a prisoner of war, what can't I accept?" Millie said. "As the Lord of Songtown, I will establish 2 departments now. One is the Ministry of Magic and the other is the Ministry of Military Affairs." Daniel Hawkins pointed to Rob Hawkins beside him and said, "The top leader of the military department, he is the Knight of Hawkins. As for the top leader of the Ministry of Magic, I have never had a choice, but now I have a choice, and that is Millie Tose. I wonder if you are willing." Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect that Baron Hawkins not only pardoned the criminals, but also gave them such a high position. The military department didn't have much to say. Although the number of soldiers was greater than that of wizards, the soldiers all recognized and obeyed Knight Robert. As for the wizard trio, they looked at each other and finally asked, "Lord Baron, if you say so, doesn't it mean?" Daniel Hawkins nodded and said, "Yes, from now on, all 3 of you, including the wizards who come in the future, will be under the control of Millie." "Ah, no," the wizard trio was very dissatisfied. After all, they came to follow Daniel Hawkins, and because of the Lord Baron, they learned to summon water elements at an unimaginable speed. Not only did they not understand, but even Millie Toss didn't understand how they learned it. After all, there are only 2 people in the country who can summon water elements so far. Now these 3 wizards from the Dawn Wizard Academy can do it. It's really unbelievable. Before the wizard trio could protest, Daniel Hawkins waved to the soldier next to him, and the soldier took out a stack of papers from somewhere and distributed them to the wizards and soldiers below, including Millie and Robert. However, it was obvious that Millie's and Robert's were different, and the wizards and the soldiers were also different according to the color markings. "What is this?" Robert asked. "Contract," said Daniel Hawkins. Chapter 143, No more talking about prisoners of war. Contract? What is the contract? Simon asked. "You read it first, and then you ask after you've finished it," Daniel Hawkins said. They all studied the paper in their hands. After a while, Daniel Hawkins said, "Millie, if you feel willing to take up this position, then sign your name. The same goes for you, sign after you name it, you will officially work for me. Lord Baron, it says that you will be paid every month, and there will be a bonus at the end of the year. Men can retire at the age of 50, and women can retire at the age of 45, and they will also have pensions. If I understand it correctly, does it mean you can get money without working?" Daniel Hawkins nodded and said, "Yes, as long as you work for me for a certain year. Of course, after signing this contract, if you want to leave, you can cancel the contract rules at any time, that is, terminate the contract." Rob Hawkins smiled and said, "Lord Baron, I don't need it. After all, I have sworn an oath. And the people I recruited have also sworn an oath." Daniel Hawkins said, "It is good to take an oath, but it is better to sign a contract." They also paid special attention to the salary column, which can only be said to be very impressive. Especially the trio of wizards are very satisfied with the salary in the contract. This means that they are as stable as the Wizards Association. It can be said that they can live a relatively decent life without taking on those dangerous and precarious commissions. Their task is very simple. During the contract period, they must obey the Lord's arrangements wholeheartedly. Of course, if they fail to perform their duties, their salary will be deducted in accordance with the corresponding regulations, and in serious cases, they will be directly dismissed. Daniel Hawkins said to Millie, "Millie, just finish reading." Millie nodded. "Is there any problem?" Millie shook her head and asked, "Baron, can I really do that? In fact, as a prisoner of war, you are fully qualified to order me to do anything, and you don't need any reward." "Why?" Daniel Hawkins said, "Let me say it for the last time, you are no longer a prisoner of war. You also listen to me, except for the soldiers outside, there are no prisoners of war in this hall. All prisoners of war have been executed. Do you all understand?" Everyone nodded. Then Daniel Hawkins continued to say to Millie, "If you are willing, sign the contract and perform the work on the contract. If you are not willing, I can give you a sum of money to tide you over the initial difficulties." When Millie heard this, a warm current hit her heart and tears burst down her face. She picked up the pen and signed her name. The warriors had already signed the contract, leaving only the wizard trio. Daniel Hawkins understood their thoughts, so he said, "Millie is completely qualified to be my Minister of Magic. Firstly, she is more familiar with the situation in Songtown than you are. Secondly, her magic level and even combat skills, the experience is far above yours. If you really want to follow me, then obey my arrangements. If you are unwilling, I am very grateful for your help in this battle, and I will also give you a sum of money as a reward." After hearing this, Simon, André and Jacques said quickly, "No, no, no, Lord Baron, you misunderstood. It's just that I think the salary is too high, so I don't need that much." These words surprised Daniel Hawkins. He had only seen people in Blue Star who complained about the low salary. How could anyone complain about the high salary? Later, through the words of the three of them, Daniel Hawkins learned that they felt that they were just students of Dawn Wizard Academy and their level was not high, so they did not deserve such good treatment. They are also worried about whether there will be a particularly difficult task, and what if they are not qualified for it. In short, it can be summed up in 2 words: low self-esteem. Daniel Hawkins explained, "As long as you serve this territory wholeheartedly, take good care of and protect my people, and help me lead everyone to live a good life, you will deserve the treatment I will give you. And the contract is not only your promise, but also my promise, and I will strictly abide by the terms of the contract." When Simon, André, and Jacques heard this, they felt excited and felt that they were indeed with the wrong person. In the end, they all signed the contract. In this way, a preliminary leadership team like Daniel Hawkins was established. Morningside slums. Emma and Susan and other members of the Hawkins haven't seen Rob and Daniel in a long time. Their only sources of information were the rumors at the college about Henry Hawkins and the town square minstrels singing about the war in Songtown. As a result, Emma and others only knew that their son and her husband were at war. As for how the fight was going, no one told Henry no matter how much he asked. In fact, this situation is quite normal. Even when Daniel Hawkins pays, no one pays attention to the bard no matter how much he boasts. After all, it was just a poor town with barren land and backwardness, and it was only a very small battle. If it were Sunk Town attacking Chenexai Town, it would still be worth seeing. Later, because Daniel Hawkins did not renew his subscription, and the bards no longer sang about Songkei Town, Emma and others completely lost the news of their husband and son. What else could Emma do? Apart from praying to the ancient gods every day, there was no other way. Fortunately, Rob gave Emma some money before leaving home. In addition to comforting Emma from time to time, all Susan can do is take care of Henry and take care of David at the same time. The most uncomfortable thing is Lila. She lives in Hawkins' house and doesn't know what to do. She can neither magic nor fight, and she has no money. She was afraid that the Hawkins family would drive her away, so she worked hard to do their laundry, do housework, and do as much as possible. In the room, Emma looked at the money given by Rob. It was getting less and less. David was about to enter school. At that time, the tuition fees, the wizard supplies purchased, and the next tutor's fee were also included. The money can only be said to be barely enough. She heard Lila cleaning the table outside, so Emma collected the money and went out and said to Lila, "Lila, where did you come from?" When Lila heard this, she immediately felt bad, because since she came to this home, Emma had not said a word to her at all, and not only Emma, but also Susan seemed to be very hostile to her. Because once she overheard them saying to their men, William, Henry, and David, "I'm warning you, stay away from that woman Lyra." After hearing this, Lila could only pretend not to hear, and then she cried silently in the room. She also wanted to leave, but where could she, an 18-year-old girl with no skills? Chapter 144. Mind the castle. "I'm from Seraphia," Lila said weakly. Emma nodded and started to talk about Seraphia being a good place. Why did she come here, and she didn't understand what Daniel meant when he said she was his work partner, and what her job was specifically. In what way can she help Daniel? When Lila faced these questions, she hesitated and couldn't answer any of them. She thought for a long time before she hesitated. I can cook, wash clothes, and wash dishes." Emma shook her head, sighed and said, "Lila, we are in a slum here. The last thing we need is people who cook and wash dishes. We are also poor and have no qualifications or ability to support servants." Hearing this, Lila held back tears, squeezed her apron tightly, lowered her head, and rubbed it uncomfortably. Emma continued, "Starting tomorrow, I will give you a sum of money, and I will ask William to find a caravan for you. You can follow the caravan back to Seraphia." Lila's tears finally couldn't stop, and she said, "Mrs. Hawkins, please don't drive me away, okay? I can skip one meal. No, I can have one meal in 2 days. I can do more work. If you think I'm not good at cooking, I can learn." Emma continued to shake her head, "This is not a matter of eating. The main reason is that you are so beautiful, and this place is not for people like you. Our family cannot be tainted by people like you, and the folks in the countryside have begun to talk secretly. You are not my daughter-in-law, you are not gifted by the king, you are so beautiful, and you are from Seraphia. You also know that neither Henry nor David can be bad imitators." Lila wiped her tears and said, "Okay, I understand, Mrs. Hawkins, thank you for taking care of me all the way. I will." At this time, they heard a commotion outside the door. Back, Baron Hawkins is back." When Emma heard this, she ran out excitedly and took a look. Oh, it turned out to be her son Daniel and her husband Rob. William's family also came out, and so did the neighbors. After a while, Daniel Hawkins was surrounded by the crowd like he had won the championship. Daniel Hawkins greeted everyone, Henry went to school, and David went to make-up classes, so. "Mother, where is Lila?" Daniel Hawkins asked. Emma looked a little uncomfortable and pouted towards the room. Daniel Hawkins entered the room and saw Lila standing there, with red and swollen eyes and a bad face, looking at Daniel Hawkins blankly. Daniel Hawkins pretended to smile and said, "What's wrong? You won't greet me when I come back." Lila ran forward and hugged Daniel Hawkins, burying her face in his chest and crying. Daniel Hawkins seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at his mother, Emma, and saw Emma's eyes wandering, and she turned her face to look out the window. He probably understood what was going on. I have wronged you during this time. Daniel Hawkins patted Lila on the back and his tone became gentler. After Lila heard this, she couldn't help it and cried even more sadly. Afterwards, no matter how much Daniel Hawkins asked, Lila said nothing. She just kept saying, "It's okay. I know the Baron is at war. I miss the Baron so much." So Daniel Hawkins went to ask his mother Emma. Emma was also quite embarrassed, but after her son's questioning, she told the situation. Daniel Hawkins was very angry after hearing this. "I can't believe that you actually want to drive Lila away, and she is an innocent girl, but she is not as dirty as you think." "Mother, Aunt, I don't want you to be so insulting." "Then what do you think we can do?" Emma said. "You have been gone for so long without even a letter, and your father has spent all his money, your brother is about to enter school, and there is money everywhere. You tell me what I can do." Susan also quickly added, "That's right," and she had just arrived at that time, and her whole body was full of perfume. Daniel Hawkins said, "What's wrong with the smell of perfume? Does the smell of perfume mean that she is a nympho? Even if she has been in a custom shop, does it mean that she must have served a man? She is so beautiful. If she is not allowed to serve men, why should she sweep the floor?" Susan said. Daniel Hawkins couldn't help it, so he told all the causes and consequences of Lila. "That's it, her first customer was me, and I didn't taint her, so she is still an innocent girl." After listening to the Baron's words, everyone fell silent. Emma also felt a little embarrassed, but Susan did not give up. "Daniel, it's not that I can't trust you, of course I believe that you have not defiled her, and if she only serves being alone with you is not considered a defilement at all, it is an honor." Susan glanced at Lila. After all the words were spoken, she no longer hid her attitude towards Lila, "But you can't just believe it when she says you are her first guest. Maybe she has received countless guests before receiving you." When Lila heard this, she shook her head desperately and cried to Daniel Hawkins quickly, "Baron, really, everything I told you before is true." She was so anxious that she burst into tears again. Came out. Susan even got impatient. "Lila, that's enough, have you cried enough? Daniel, I'm mainly afraid that you will be deceived by her pretty face and those tears. Such a woman is the best at controlling a man's heart." Emma nodded. Daniel Hawkins faced his aunt's words, and he realized that no matter which planet or which parallel world, argumentative people are everywhere. He saw that Lila wanted to say something. Daniel stopped her and said, "Lila, there is no need to say anything, I believe in you. With me here, no one can drive you away. And whoever dares to drive you away, I will be the first to drive him away. Did you all hear that?" Daniel Hawkins said to his mother Emma. Emma nodded reluctantly, but Susan snorted coldly. Seeing their attitude, Daniel Hawkins said, "I remember there is a saying in the ancient God's scripture, you should not judge others, lest you be judged by others. Am I right?" Emma and Susan's faces became serious when they heard the ancient God's scripture. Daniel Hawkins continued, "Susan, you just swore that she had been defiled and had countless customers before she met me. Do you have any evidence?" Susan was stunned and just said, "I will not be wrong about such a woman." "So you have no evidence?" Daniel Hawkins said, "Moreover, you questioned my judgment. So you don't recognize me as the Lord? In this case, you don't care about my castle and my territory. Susan, you should stay here in the slums. Because I will bring a woman like Leela to live in the castle. If any of you mind, don't come." Chapter 145. Settling the family. When Daniel Hawkins mentioned the Book of Ancient Gods and moving to the castle, Susan immediately changed her face. "Oh, Lord Baron, you really, I didn't mean that. Yes, it's my fault. I will confess to the ancient god." Daniel Hawkins said, "It's not enough to confess to the ancient gods. You have to confess to Lyra. Emma, and you." "What?" Susan and Emma looked at each other, completely unable to believe what Daniel Hawkins was telling them. "Lord Baron, you want me to confess to May, her?" Susan smiled and said, "Don't make trouble." Emma also smiled, looked at her husband Rob and said, "Yes, Rob, tell your son to stop making trouble." Seeing that Rob was indifferent, Emma continued, "Daniel, I am your mother." "I'm your aunt," Susan said. Daniel Hawkins just took this opportunity to establish his authority in front of his family. Since ancient times, relatives have been the most difficult to deal with, and relatives like Susan who have no sense of proportion are even more difficult to deal with. After all, not everyone is like Rob Hawkins. Daniel Hawkins said, "I am your lord, I am your baron. You can think that I have no conscience and that I am showing off, but I don't care. Anyway, if you want to follow me, then obey me. From now on I will don't ask questions about who you bring back, where you live, and what you do. Do you understand?" Emma continued to look at her husband, but Rob remained expressionless and showed no sign of wanting to speak for her. Susan was also shocked by her nephew's majesty, so both women apologized to Lila. "I'm sorry." Only then did Lila react and said quickly, it doesn't have to be like this." Daniel Hawkins still said to Lila seriously, "Is it possible that you also want to resist your lord?" Lila shook her head and accepted the two women's apologies. After Henry and David came back, they saw that everyone had packed their luggage. Susan and Emma seemed to have forgotten the accusations against Lyra during the day. Now they were laughing so hard that they couldn't see their teeth. Susan was talking endlessly to Henry and David about how they were going to move to the castle. Henry and David were extremely happy after hearing this, and then searched the house for Daniel Hawkins, but except for the three wizards waiting in the living room, they found no sign of Daniel Hawkins. Henry looked at these three wizards and recognized them all. He quickly went up to say hello. "Hey, aren't these seniors Simon, André, and Jacques? What are you doing here?" They looked at Henry and all smiled. "We are all following Baron Hawkins now and are his official employees. After you have packed up, we will teleport you to Hawkins Castle tonight. From now on, you will all instead of living in a slum, you can live in a castle." Henry and David clapped each other's hands happily, and David asked again, "What about my brother?" Simon said, "The Baron has something to do, so he will go back first. Don't worry, we will teleport you there absolutely safely." Henry and David nodded repeatedly. A castle is a castle, much better than a slum. Not only does it have a yard, there are many rooms, but more importantly, there is no need to pay rent. This is a huge benefit to Susan. As long as she can live here for free, it doesn't matter even if the Baron wants her to apologize to 100 beauties. Of course, she was very happy. Susan still knew how to choose the room. Of course, Emma had to choose the room first. After Emma made the choice, she also chose a room that was more ventilated and spacious. She said to Daniel Hawkins "Then I want this one." But who knew that Daniel Hawkins said, "Aunt, do you like this room?" Susan narrowed her eyes with a smile and nodded repeatedly, "Yes, Lord Baron." Daniel Hawkins said, "Okay, then this room will be given to Lila." Susan's eyes suddenly widened and her mouth opened slightly. Lila said quickly, "No, no, no, I don't need such a good room, this room is too big for me." Daniel Hawkins looked at Lila and smiled, "I order you to live here. Susan, you don't have any objections?" Susan understood that this was the Baron's blow to her. She restored her smile as quickly as possible, "Of course I have no objection. Everything is subject to the arrangement of the Baron." Daniel Hawkins nodded and said, "That's good, Susan, it seems you are still very conscious." After saying that, he felt that the goal had been achieved, so he let them choose the remaining room allocation. Susan looked at Daniel's leaving back, and no matter how much she said, she didn't dare to express her dissatisfaction or anger. She smiled at Lila and said, "Miss Lila, I won't disturb you for now. I'll choose another room." After that, she hurried away. After reorganizing his family, when Daniel Hawkins was thinking about the next step, his brother David came over. Daniel Hawkins looked at his younger brother who rarely spoke and said with a smile, "David, what can I do?" "Brother, how can I make up for classes in the future?" Daniel Hawkins said, "You don't need to make up lessons, the wizards we have here are enough to be your teachers." "Oh, okay, but I..." Seeing David hesitate to speak, Daniel Hawkins said, "If you have anything to say, just say it. The entrance exam will be held next month, and I'm afraid I won't be able to pass it." David said, "Don't worry, as long as you are Hawkins's man, you will definitely pass it." Daniel Hawkins said, "By the way, how well do you master magic now?" So David shook his head in shame, "I can't even cast a shield." Daniel Hawkins was quite surprised, "No way, you have been taking remedial classes for so long, and you don't even have a shield? Henry at least has an ordinary shield." David lowered his head and stopped talking. Daniel Hawkins looked at David's value. "Damn, that value is so low that it can even be ignored." David is a person who has magic, but not much. If his last name is not Hawkins, perhaps only a lower level academy than Dawn Wizard Academy will accept him. Daniel Hawkins shook his head and smiled. It doesn't matter, don't worry, even if you do nothing, Dawn Wizard Academy will still accept you. David's eyes suddenly brightened and he nodded repeatedly. If you have nothing to do, go and rest first, and let me be alone for a while. Daniel Hawkins said. David went there happily, but then Henry Hawkins came in and said with a joking face, "Brother, my dear brother." Daniel Hawkins looked at him with disgust and asked, "What's the matter? How can I go to the academy tomorrow? Should I ask the seniors to take me there? Damn it, it's been so long, why don't you know how to teleport?" Daniel Hawkins felt like vomiting blood. Chapter 146. The Mueller Brothers Who Want to Invest. The Principal's Office of Dawn Wizard Academy. The Mueller brothers were smoking and talking about current affairs in the office again. Although Songtown is a small place, Daniel Hawkins is still a topic of special concern to them. Perhaps in the whole world, only the two old guys of the Mueller family care about Daniel Hawkins the most. After all, Daniel Hawkins is a national champion from their academy. Moreover, they also hope to make money from Daniel Hawkins. What's more, the only two Thunder students in the entire academy, Mario Hawthorne and Alan Hawthorne, have transferred to Seraphia Wizard Academy. Therefore, among the disciples of Principal Mueller, only Charlie Mart is left, which is equivalent to no such student, because since losing to Daniel Hawkins in the last preliminaries, he has been depressed and has been on sick leave at home for a long time. According to his parents, he seems to be disturbed by the devil, so his parents take him to church every week. When they got to this point, Principal Mueller shook his head and sighed, "Charlie Martel, what a pity." Paul Mueller also said, "Yes, people who go to the church will basically make donations, which is equivalent to giving money to the church in vain." Principal Mueller said, "You only think about money every day." Paul Mueller said, "Brother, look at what you said, if it weren't for my position, why don't you try to sit here? Such a big college needs money everywhere." Okay, Principal Mueller glanced at him, "I've heard your words so many times that my ears are calloused. I want to see how much money you have made during this period." Speaking of this, Paul Mueller's eyes lit up, and he took out a stack of parchment and said, "I have done a lot of things. First of all, thanks to Daniel Hawkins winning the championship, the Wizard Association also opened. We have started to re-evaluate our academy, and now our academy has been upgraded directly from level 5 to level 3. Principal Mueller said disdainfully, "Tisk, so what, the Wizard Association still didn't give us funding." Paul Mueller said, "But at least our commissions for mid-level and high-level and above have increased, and we are still qualified to increase the commission price. More importantly, brother, have you forgotten that Wizard Academies of level 3 and above do not have to pay taxes to the nobles of the occupied territories? Our Dawn Wizard Academy occupies the territories of the 4 nobles in Dawn Town, which means that the 4 nobles cannot collect taxes. Moreover, they have to think that it is an honor to open a Wizard Academy in their territory. Brother, you also know that the 4 nobles have not funded us now. If we have to pay them taxes without funding, we will be very uncomfortable." Principal Mueller nodded, "That's right, but this is Daniel Hawkins' business, I want to hear what you did." "Brother, don't be anxious." Paul Mueller continued to flip through the parchment, then took out a piece of paper and said, "Brother, you see, our college has been upgraded, so I increased the tuition fees. The tuition fees have doubled directly. Not only that, I also bought a lot of spell books for those students to buy, especially wands. I told them directly that the cost of making wands is getting higher and higher, so I doubled the price of the same wand. In addition, I also reduced the budget of the student cafeteria. Not only that, I also reduced the remuneration for their commissions. Of course, everything for teachers remains the same, but there will be no salary increase this year." Principal Mueller was looking at the list while listening to his brother's report. He was more and more surprised. He couldn't help but angrily said, "Asshole, how can you do this? If this gets out, won't those students and parents scold us to death?" Paul Mueller said, "Oh, don't worry. After I did this, guess what, those parents actually cooperated. I only didn't increase one thing, that is, the standard for accepting students. Except for the remote Songtown, other towns have come to us to sign up. We have more students now, and there will be more and more in the future. The more the better, ha ha ha." Even if they want to scold us for charging unreasonable fees, let them scold us. Do they have any choice? Brother, tell the truth, we have been old wizards for so many years, don't we know them? Even if those parents are just swilling, as long as they find that their children can show a little bit of magic talent, they will definitely sell their houses, borrow money and send their children here. But most children have only a little talent, which can even be ignored. For such students, other colleges will definitely not want them, but we want them all. Who can resist money? We all know that those students, no matter how they train for a lifetime, can make a good quality ordinary shield. Take Henry Hawkins for example, look at him, he is still spinning in the ordinary shield, and he can't even learn a teleportation spell. It is said that Daniel Hawkins' younger brother will come soon. I went to find out, and he is still the same stuff. It doesn't matter, even if they don't charge tuition, they are living signs. And okay, that's enough. Principal Mueller interrupted his brother, put down the paper, rubbed his eyes, and had to say that although he was quite disgusted in his heart, he couldn't resist digging so much money for the college. Now the two brothers rely on this college to make a decent living. Moreover, it is very likely that they will never meet another Daniel Hawkins in their lifetime. The third-level academy is probably the highest level. By the way, Daniel Hawkins defeated the Toes Knight. Seeing that his brother didn't want to talk about money, Paul Mueller changed the topic to talk about other things. At this point, it was Principal Mueller's turn to get excited. I have to say, this is indeed quite surprising. Although Songke Town is a small place, it also means that Daniel Hawkins will be a serious person from now on. Territory, barren with army. It's a pity that Songke Town is poor and dangerous, and can't stir up any excitement. Paul Mueller said, to be honest, for us, it is not as useful as the national championship title. In other words, I haven't seen Daniel Hawkins for a long time. I think I need to have him come to the academy from time to time. Paul Mueller lit his pipe and said, after all, those parents came from the name of Hawkins, and they all want to train their children to become the second Hawkins. What do you want? Principal Mueller asked. Hey, brother, we have made a lot of money during this period. It is time to make some investments. Paul Mueller smoked his pipe and rolled his eyes and said, although Daniel Hawkins is the Lord, but he must be in a tight situation, so why don't we cooperate with him and make an investment? What do you think? Principal Mueller waved his hand and said, you can do whatever you want. Chapter 147. Leading by example. Daniel Hawkins was surprised to receive an invitation from Principal Mueller. He looked at the invitation letter and thought, could it be that he was asked to give a speech again? He would not do this, it was too boring and a waste of time. More importantly, he did not want to see the two old biddens of the Mueller brothers. However, he was quite happy to go to the Dawn Wizard Academy and meet those slum and civilian classmates, and there were some people he wanted to meet. So he teleported to the hall of the Dawn Wizard Academy at mealtime, and then, while everyone was not paying attention, he put on his hood and slipped directly into the student cafeteria, and sat down in his usual seat. The classmates came one after another. The noble students had already surrendered and no longer fought with the civilian students. Once they arrived at the cafeteria, they all consciously stayed in the corner. The civilian students came in one after another, all talking and laughing, telling the heroic deeds of Baron Hawkins. At this time, Daniel Hawkins heard a noble student complaining in a low voice, "Hey, you keep saying these things every day, don't you get tired of it?" Another noble student sitting opposite him quickly put his index finger on the middle of his lips and whispered, "Shut up, I still want to have a good meal. What if there is another fight, there will be no food to eat." Daniel Hawkins lowered his hood even lower and covered his face, trying hard to hold back his laughter. At this time, a classmate came to him and said, "Hey, why are you sitting here? Get out of the way, this is not your place to sit." Daniel Hawkins lowered his head and deliberately made his voice hoarse, "What's wrong with me sitting here?" When the classmate heard the other person's voice, he felt very strange and said, "You are new here. This is the position of Baron Hawkins. No one can sit here except him. I want to sit here, what's wrong?" Daniel Hawkins said while holding back his laughter. "Hey, I'm giving you face." After waving to his partner behind him, the classmate began to roll up his sleeves. He was too lazy to talk nonsense and went straight up to punch him. Seeing this, Daniel Hawkins immediately leaned back and dodged the other party's punch. At the same time, his hood fell down, so his face was exposed. He took the opportunity to raise his hands in surrender and said, "Don't hit me, don't hit me, I'm scared, ha ha ha." Baron Hawkins. The classmate wiped his eyes and couldn't believe who he saw. Daniel Hawkins nodded, "Now I can sit here." After confirming that it was Baron Hawkins, everyone cheered, and even the noble students poked their heads over from time to time. After all, no matter how unhappy these noble students were with Daniel Hawkins, they had to admit his strength. They all wanted to hear what secrets Daniel Hawkins had to learn magic. The classmates were so enthusiastic that no matter how Daniel Hawkins refused, these students had to pool money to treat Baron Hawkins to a sumptuous meal. "Hey, why is the taste different?" Daniel Hawkins frowned and said. "Ah, Baron Hawkins, you haven't been back for too long, you don't know." The classmate told them about the tuition increase, the reduction in the food budget, forcing them to buy useless spell books, and even the price of the broken wand doubled. Daniel Hawkins became more and more angry as he listened. "How dare they do this? It's all because of you," the classmate said, but as soon as he said it, he felt something was wrong, so he quickly explained, "It's like this, because after you won the championship, the Dawn Wizard Academy rose 2 levels. Alas, what's the difference between rising 2 levels? The level of the teachers is still the same, not only that, our burden is even heavier." Another classmate also said, "Baron, have you noticed that there are fewer students in our slums?" Daniel Hawkins glanced at the cafeteria, and it was true. Although there were many students, many old faces were gone. The classmate continued, "They couldn't afford the tuition and dropped out." When Paul Mueller learned that Daniel Hawkins had come to the academy, he immediately set out to look for him. When he arrived at the student cafeteria, as soon as he saw Daniel Hawkins, he quickly strode forward and said, "Hey, Baron, come on, don't eat here. From now on, you can go to the teacher's cafeteria. And it's all free, including your 2 brothers." When the classmates saw Paul Mueller, they simply saluted the green-robed wizard and consciously left the Baron. All of a sudden, Daniel Hawkins' table was cleared. Daniel Hawkins looked at the old bidden in front of him and smiled, "No, I'm sitting well here." "Oh, the food here is not very good." Paul Mueller said, "Listen to me, go to the teacher's cafeteria, absolutely no problem." "Oh, you also know that the food here is not very good." Daniel Hawkins said, "I have brought honor to your college, but you let my classmates eat so badly." Paul Mueller was stunned for a moment, and the Baron said seriously, "I promise that from tomorrow, the food will be restored to the way it was before." Everyone applauded when they heard it. "How about you go to my office now, Baron, I have something important to talk to you about." Paul Mueller said, "I promise you that it will definitely be good for you." Daniel Hawkins said, "No, you also know that I am now a lord, very busy, and have no time." "Oh, Song Town can keep you so busy." Paul Mueller said, "Anyway, I hope you can make a decision after talking to me." Daniel Hawkins waved his hand and said, "No need." Then he stood up and turned on the echo spell and shouted, "Listen to me, if you can't afford the tuition in the future, or don't want to study in this broken academy, remember to come to Song Town to find me, I am your Baron Hawkins. After you go back, tell this information to the students who dropped out." Paul Mueller said in an unhappy tone, "Daniel, what you said is a bit too much." What can you do to me?" Daniel Hawkins pointed at Paul Mueller and continued to shout, "With such blood-sucking scum, it's useless even if this academy gets a level, it's a bad school." Paul Mueller said, "If you say that again, I will have to drive you away. Don't think I'm afraid of you just because you're the national champion. It's easy for me to deal with you." Daniel Hawkins strode forward and stood in front of him, saying very oppressively, "You can try." Paul Mueller swallowed his saliva and said coldly, "Don't forget, you still have 2 younger brothers who are still studying here." Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "Oh, thank you for your reminder. From now on, my 2 younger brothers will not come again." Then he shouted to all the classmates, "We, the Hawkins family, set an example. From today on, we will never step into the Dawn Wizard Academy again." Then he pointed at Paul Mueller's nose and said, "I warn you, Paul Mueller, you old deng, don't cheat under my name anymore." Chapter 148. Who wants this garbage? All the students applauded, even the aristocratic students applauded. It seemed that even the aristocratic students could not stand what the academy was doing during this period. Paul Mueller said angrily, "Daniel Hawkins, don't think that you are a real figure after becoming the lord of Songke Town. You are just a poor man. Young man, I am giving you a face before I call you Sir Baron. I have met nobles who are more powerful than you. What's so great about you? Hey, get out of here now. I advise you not to come back to us if something happens in the future. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, it won't take long before you go to Songke Town to find me in person. Paul Muller laughed, then gave him a look of contempt, then pointed at the group of slum students, flung his sleeves and left with his hands behind his back. The classmates looked at Baron Hawkins with admiration and remembered what he said before, I will not betray my class. It seemed to be true. They even had the urge to drop out of school immediately. One classmate asked, Lord Baron, it seems you have a solution. What is it? We want to drop out now. Daniel Hawkins shook his head and said, you should stay here for the time being and wait for news from me at any time. If any of you want to come to me, just teleport directly to the West End Tavern in Songtown and report your identity. If you don't know how to teleport, ask someone who can teleport for help. If I'm not free after you get there, you should rest in the tavern first. You should always remember one thing. If you have any difficulties, go to Baron Hawkins. Do you understand? They nodded. Daniel Hawkins took the opportunity to meet two people before leaving. Anyway, he will never come again in the future, and I will not come if they invite me to come. I'm so angry, so angry. Paul Muller has lived to this age without being choked by anyone, and the other person is still a young boy in his early 20s. Humph, do you really think that if you win a championship, you will become a person, and if you become a lord, you will become a person? Bah, it's nothing. You're still too young. If you get such a small result, you'll just hit your nose and face. You'll just have to wait for him to stumble. Yes, Paul Muller thought, I'll just wait to see him stumble. Thinking of this, he was going to go to Seraphia after school to relax. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. School is almost over, who is it? Could it be Daniel Hawkins? He must have regretted it. No matter what, Paul Muller still looked forward to seeing Daniel Hawkins. At the beginning of the interview, he was surprised to find that it was Teacher Black Bear from the alchemy department. He said with an unhappy look on his face, didn't I tell you not to come to me if you have nothing to do? Paul Muller was already in a bad mood, and he was even more unhappy when he saw Teacher Black Bear's slovenly appearance. He suppressed his annoyance and said impatiently, if you have anything to do, tell me quickly. Teacher Black Bear saluted, and then said, Mr. Mueller, I am here to thank you for recruiting me, but... Hearing the word but, Paul Muller became even more unhappy. He waved his hand and said, I have said it many times. The finances are tight now and there is no scientific research funding for you. I can provide you with free food and accommodation. It's not bad to have a monthly salary. Teacher Black Bear nodded and said, yes, you are right, so I want to resign. What? Paul Mueller asked in surprise, say it again. I want to resign. Teacher Black Bear said. If he hadn't seen Teacher Black Bear's solemn look, Paul Mueller would have thought that the other party was threatening him with resignation to ask for funds. But it's impossible. Teacher Black Bear would never dare to threaten him. You actually want to resign, what are you thinking? Paul Mueller said. Teacher Black Bear said, I don't have students, and I can't do experiments. The only thing I can bring value to the students here is to provide magic potions. Then just provide the potions and plant the magic plants and that's it, Paul Mueller said. Teacher Black Bear shook his head and said, this is not my ambition. What? Paul Mueller never expected that Teacher Black Bear would shock him twice in such a short period of time. What does it mean to have no ambition? Does he also have ambition? Hey, you're kidding me. Paul Mueller said, go back now. I'll pretend I haven't heard what you said. Teacher Black Bear said, I want to resign. Then he put a piece of parchment in front of Paul Muller's desk. Paul Mueller took it over and looked at it. Is this a resignation letter? Tell me, where are you going next? Paul Mueller said, you have to think about it. If you come to me if you regret it in the future, I will never care about you again. Teacher Black Bear was very honest, I'm going to Songke Town. Baron Hawkins officially hired me to be his chief alchemist. Daniel Hawkins? It's actually him? Ha ha ha. Paul Mueller smiled and said, okay, you go, there is a famine in that extremely poor place, and you can't even grow a vegetable. Do you still want to grow magic plants on land that can't be planted? Teacher Black Bear smiled and said, as long as I go there, I can grow vegetables. Okay, Paul Mueller laughed until tears came out. Are you still obsessed with your experimental potion? Don't forget how many times you have failed. I don't think Daniel Hawkins will spend money on you, and I don't think your Lord Baron has money. Black Bear, you are a bottomless pit, sucking all the money in, but there is no effect. Teacher Black Bear is very honest. Lord Baron has confidence in me, and I have confidence in Lord Baron too. Go to hell, Paul Mueller thought. Okay, if you really want to leave, I won't let you go so easily. He flipped through the information on the table and said, there are still 3 days left in this month. If you leave, your salary for this month will be gone, and I won't pay you back. He thought this would stimulate Black Bear a little, but who knew that Teacher Black Bear said nonchalantly, okay, then I'll leave first if there's nothing else. After that, Black Bear saluted and left, and he also closed the door by the way. Paul Mueller was stunned in the office for a moment, then burst into laughter. Great, Daniel Hawkins, you want such a piece of trash, you have a good eye. This is not bad, anyway, Mr. Black Bear is not an important teacher, and Mr. Black Bear has helped him make a lot of illegal gains, so it's better for him to leave, so that he will never be afraid of being exposed. Oh, even if he is exposed, it doesn't matter, after all, this college is his. Just as he was packing up and preparing to leave, there was another knock on the door. Chapter 149. I do not approve. Hearing the knock on the door, Paul Mueller couldn't help but sneered, thinking that the Black Bear guy must have regretted it. He said come in angrily, and when the door opened, to his surprise, the man who came to see him was John Dillon. Although John Dillon has no significant presence like Mr. Black Bear, he has become the star teacher of this college since his student Daniel Hawkins won the national championship. Almost all students, especially those freshmen who come to register, come for John Dillon. Facing the most popular hot chick in the college, Paul Mueller's attitude was of course completely different from that of Teacher Black Bear. He put away the stinky face he just showed to Teacher Black Bear and replaced it with a gentle smile. Yo, Dillon, the teacher is here. Take a seat. John Dillon did not sit down, but simply bowed and placed a piece of parchment in front of Paul Mueller. Paul Mueller had just taken off his glasses but had not yet put them on. Although he could not see the words on the parchment clearly, he already had a very bad feeling. Just listen to John Dillon say, Teacher Mueller, I want to resign. Paul Mueller frowned, then smiled, and said, in the long time since Dawn Wizarding Academy has been in operation, or in all the years I have lived, I have never heard of a teacher wanting to resign from the Wizarding Academy. De Teacher Lun, you are resigning now. To be honest, I am a little surprised. If you have encountered any difficulties, just tell me and our college will do our best to solve it for you. In fact, the two teachers resigned on the same day, and Daniel Hawkins happened to be here on this day. In addition, Teacher Black Bear wanted to join the Hawkins family. If nothing else, John Dillon would definitely want to join the Hawkins family. Want to join the Hawkins family? No, this is absolutely not possible. That loser, Mr. Black Bear, is going to leave, but Mr. Dillon is one of the most important teaching resources in their college, so we can't just let him go. Paul Mueller couldn't help but curse in his heart, humph, this damn Daniel. Sure enough, I just heard John Dillon say, except for having too many students, I don't have any difficulties now. It's just... Ah, I understand, Paul Mueller said, there are too many students, and it's too tiring. In this way, I will give you a holiday, you have a good rest, and when you come back, I will rearrange the students for you. You look at me now, I'm very busy too. Seeing that John Dillon was still shaking his head, he then said, okay, I'll give you a week of paid leave, that's all. Seeing John Dillon shaking his head again, he was a little displeased. Is it possible that you want to increase your salary? You have to know that now that the college does not have the support of the 4 major families, the college is also very difficult now. Please understand. John Dillon shook his head again and said, no, you are mistaken. Oh, okay, I'll give you a salary increase, okay, I'll give you a 5% increase. John Dillon shook his head. 10%. Teacher Dillon continued to shake his head. He was still unable to speak. Paul Mueller gritted his teeth and didn't want to waste time anymore, so he slapped the table and seemed to have made an extremely difficult decision and said, okay, 30%, and I will give you 1 month of paid vacation. And wait until next year, I will give you a robe. Teacher Dylan, I hope you will not be ignorant. John Dylan had a bitter look on his face. He folded his hands and pursed his lips tightly, lowering his head slightly to think. After all, the conditions given by Teacher Mueller are indeed very tempting. Moreover, he has been at Dawn Wizard Academy for so long and is used to everything. More importantly, this academy is registered with the Wizards Association. When he heard Daniel Hawkins say that he wanted to establish a college, he thought it was a fantasy. It would be difficult to get the approval and registration from the Wizards Association, let alone other costs. However, although reason told him that this matter was ridiculous, he still had an inexplicable trust in Daniel Hawkins. It may be that he has been witnessing incredible things since he met Daniel Hawkins, especially what an amazing performance on the field. If John Dylan leaves the Morning Wizard Academy now, what he will have to face next is a small rural town of poor people, and he will also have to face the dangerous Songhay forest that may break out at any time, and there may also be a meeting, although the possibility of plundering other nobles is very small. After all, there is nothing to plunder in Song Town, but what if? How about it, Mr. Dylan, if there's nothing else, let's stop our conversation here. Paul Muller said while pretending to be busy collecting materials. As for the parchment, he pretended not to see it, and waited. Just burn it when you're done. Mr. Muller, I have decided that I still want to resign. John Dylan said. Hearing this, Paul Muller was already very impatient. He tapped his fingers in time with his words and said, Teacher Dylan, don't be ignorant. I know you want to go to Daniel Hawkins. No. John Dylan nodded. Paul Muller said, I don't know what he promised you, but you have to know that that is Songhay Town, that place is simply. This time it was John Dylan's turn to interrupt him. Teacher Muller, needless to say the rest, I know everything, but I still decided to go to Songhay Town. If you quit now, you won't get your salary this month, and it won't be that easy to come back in the future. John Dylan nodded and said, I know that, but it doesn't matter. The money Daniel Hawkins gave him last time was enough for him for a long time according to his consumption level, unless he had his eyes on another piece of equipment. After hearing what John Dylan said, Paul Mueller finally couldn't help it and cursed directly, You want to quit? I don't approve it. He was anxious and broke his defense. He picked up the parchment, then struck a match and burned it. I don't approve it. But, John Dylan said. Get out now, I have a headache now, I'm not feeling well. We'll talk about this later. Paul Mueller said angrily. At that moment, John Dylan had no choice, because when he wanted to say something, Paul Mueller would get angry and stop him from saying it, so he could only leave Paul Mueller's office. After Paul Mueller saw the door closed, he cursed Daniel Hawkins repeatedly, Resign? What if he doesn't approve? Yes, just put it off for now and think of a way later, or maybe John Dylan will wake up later. After Paul Mueller had a night in Seraphia, he came to the college the next day and saw a group of students in the hall. He hurried up and asked, What happened? The students said, Teacher Dylan left. He followed the students' instructions and looked at the bulletin board, and saw John Dylan wrote a big resignation letter and posted it on it. Chapter 150. Establishment of a new department. Daniel Hawkins' trip to the academy was full of rewards, especially from two teachers, Dylan and Black Bear. Except for teacher Black Bear, Millie was very satisfied with John Dylan, because her job during this period was to recruit wizards. To be honest, if we go by Daniel Hawkins' standards, those wizards who are willing to come simply fail. Daniel Hawkins especially made a statement. He made it clear that he did not want to spend a lot of money and hire a bunch of boring wizards like the Tosai Knights did. However, John Dylan alone could rival 10 low-end wild wizards. More importantly, Teacher Dylan's character made him feel at ease. Strong ability but poor character is very troublesome for Daniel Hawkins' current size. Of course, these things are hard to come by. As for Mr. Black Bear, he wants to establish an alchemy department, and he has to make a completely different decision from other colleges. He wants to vigorously develop the alchemy department. Now when he investigated alchemy products through formal channels, he understood why even Seraphia Wizarding Academy did not develop the alchemy department properly. The reason was that alchemy products had been monopolized by the Wizards Association. If you engage in alchemy products in private, once discovered by the Wizards Association, the consequences will be serious. You will either have to face a huge fine or be imprisoned. If you really want to develop the alchemy department, say hello to the Wizards Association in advance, this means giving the Wizards Association a large amount of money, and even the Wizards Association will get a share of the profits from subsequent alchemical products. If you go back and forth like this, there is simply no profit. It's no wonder that it's hard for alchemists to get along in this world. It's no wonder that with the Wizards Association so locked up, the best way out for alchemists is in the alchemy department of the Wizards Association. However, how could it be so easy to enter the alchemy department of the Wizards Association? In the hall, after Daniel Hawkins introduced John Dillon and Teacher Black Bear to everyone, he said, "From now on, I will establish the Magic Teaching Department and the Alchemy Department. Of course, the Magic Teaching Department and the Alchemy Department will still belong to the Magic Department. The Minister is in charge." After hearing this, Millie quickly said, "Lord Baron, this." Daniel Hawkins stretched out his hand to stop her and said, "I know your worries. You are probably worried about the Wizards Association." Millie nodded. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, "I just established the Magic Teaching Department, not an academy, and the Alchemy Department has not refined anything yet. Even if it produces some contraband, so what? I'm not selling it to the public. Yes, I'm not even interested in selling it on the black market. Besides, they're not interested in messing with us in this rundown town in a remote area." After hearing this, everyone laughed and felt that Daniel Hawkins was right. Millie also nodded thoughtfully. Daniel Hawkins continued, "Millie, I also know the difficulty of recruiting wizards, so I established the Magic Teaching Department, thinking that instead of recruiting, it is better to cultivate them yourself and then use them yourself." Millie said, "The idea is good, but you also said that ours is a rundown town. Will anyone come?" Daniel Hawkins thought of the wizards who dropped out of Morningside Wizarding Academy because they couldn't pay tuition. He nodded and said, "There will be, we just need to spread the news. Millie, especially in the slums of Morningside Town, no matter which slum is it in? I hope you'll pay attention. So do we charge tuition?" Daniel Hawkins shook his head and said, "No, and if students are willing to come, not only will we not charge tuition, but we will also provide a lunch with meat. If you study well or have certain abilities, as long as the wizard students are willing to work for me, I can even pay them." Millie nodded and said, "Okay, Lord Baron, I will do as you wish." Daniel Hawkins nodded with satisfaction, and then took out 2 contracts and handed them to John Dillon and Teacher Black Bear by Simon. "Contract?" John Dillon couldn't help but ask. "Yes, it is actually equivalent to what you call a contract. But I prefer to call it a contract." Daniel Hawkins said, "After signing, you will become my head of the Magic Teaching Department and the head of the Alchemy Department. As for salary, the remuneration is all in the contract. You can take a good look at it. Of course, if you are dissatisfied with it, you can raise it and we can discuss it." Teacher Dillon and Teacher Black Bear didn't even look at it and signed it directly. I have to say that this move by these 2 teachers moved Daniel inexplicably. Daniel looked at his father and asked, "Knight Hawkins, what do you have to report?" Robert saluted and said, "Lord Baron, we are not fighting now, and our soldiers have recovered from their injuries. I wonder if Lord Baron has any plans." Daniel Hawkins said, "Let them continue training. Although our strength is currently only 100, your task is to make them the best among the best." Rob Hawkins nodded, "Yes. But I still have a question." "Explain." "What to do with those prisoners?" Rob asked. "You have killed all the wizard prisoners, but we still have 300 captive soldiers. What should we do with them?" "Yes, there are so many captives." Daniel Hawkins has been thinking about wizards during this time, and he actually forgot about these captives. Just listen to Rob Hawkins continue to ask, "Excuse me, Lord Baron, if you want to be incorporated into our military system?" Daniel Hawkins thought for a while, shook his head and said, "No, I can't have these people in my army. I know the character of these prisoners too well. Once they become elite soldiers and have strength, the first thing they do is bully the common people. They are all spoiled by the Tozay Knights. I have no interest or energy to reform their minds." Rob Hawkins said, "So what should we do with them? We can't just keep them like this every day. This is also a big expense." Daniel Hawkins agreed very much with what his father said, and if these prisoners had nothing to do, they would be prone to trouble sooner or later. He also understood that in addition to training soldiers, his father had to devote a lot of energy to managing this group of prisoners, which was indeed quite tiring. "Millie," Daniel Hawkins called, "please arrange for your people to make a poster for me." I will post it on the notice board outside the castle to see if any of the townspeople know anything about architecture. Of course. Millie, if you are free, I hope you will do it, after all, your painting skills are quite good. After hearing this, Millie blushed again and showed a sweet smile. Could it be that the Baron was making fun of her? Okay, then I will finish the painting and then go to the slums. I can take Simon and the others there then. Well, after all, they are more familiar with it than me. Daniel Hawkins smiled and said, they are all under your control, you can take whomever you want. Millie smiled wider.